This is Twitter Beefs. We're going to be covering Sam Altman, Marc Andreessen, Mark Zuckerberg, Roon, Eliezer Yudkowsky, Naval, Ravikant, and many more. Booyah! Welcome to Doom Debates. I'm Liran Shapira. Today we're going to be taking our periodic look at Twitter beefs. All the prominent individuals who are taking a break away from that research paper that they're supposed to be writing, or that model that they're supposed to be training, or that company that they're supposed to be running, and coming on Twitter and beefing with one another. Twitter has been going crazy. Over the last couple of months, the vibe has been shifting from like, can these things really reason? Are we actually going to be in an AI winter? Is it going to take a few decades? Is AI hitting a wall? The vibe has shifted from there to, yeah, this is definitely the singularity. Everybody's hyped up about getting superintelligence in like 2 to 3 years, just like Elon said, to get credit where credit is due. And like, how is the singularity going to go down? Who's going to make the most money? How fast is it going to be? Once we get to AGI, how fast is the gap between AGI and ASI? People on Twitter these days are singularity minded. And because of that, there's just a lot of crazy contradictions and beefs that are being tweeted that you're going to see today. Are you ready? This is Twitter Beefs. Let's kick things off with our favorite antagonist, Marc Andreessen. A few weeks ago, Marc went on Joe Rogan, and he made a couple of very bold claims. Number one, the Biden administration wanted to treat AI like a big object of censorship. According to Marc, like way worse than social media censorship. That's his first claim. And then an even more bold claim that the Biden administration wanted to basically pick 2 or 3 AI companies to be winners and lock out every other potential AI startup from competing with those winners. Here, listen for yourself. Here is what Marc Andreessen claimed to Joe Rogan.
This is one of the threats from the government is the government basically going to force our startups to come into compliance, not just with their trade rules, but also with all of their, essentially a censorship regime on AI that's exactly like the censorship regime that we had on social media. And the Biden administration was explicitly on that path. We had meetings this spring that were the most alarming meetings I've ever been in, where they were taking us through their plans, and it was
like what kind of? Can you talk about it?
Basically, just full government control, like this sort of thing. There will be a small number of large companies that will be completely regulated and controlled by the government. They told us, they just said, don't even start startups. Like, don't even bother. Like, there's just no way. There's no way that they can succeed. There's no way that we're going to permit that to happen.
Wow.
Yeah, they said this is already over. It's going to be 2 or 3 companies, and we're going to control them, and that's that. Like, this is already finished.
The Biden administration told us don't even start startups, don't even bother. There's no way they can succeed. It's going to be 2 or 3 companies, and we are going to control them, and that's that. When I first heard Marc say this stuff, I was like, wow, this sounds like some bullshit. Because it's intentionally missing some pretty important context, like, okay, 2 companies. Which 2 companies? Are we talking OpenAI, Anthropic? Are we talking Microsoft, Google? How about a little bit of detail? You don't think the Biden administration has selected these companies yet? It's still deciding? And also, which department are we talking about? I'm sure it's not literally President Biden himself, so is this the FTC, the military, the Department of Homeland Security, the CIA, the Department of Energy? You can't give me a lead on which cabinet secretary we're talking about here? There's a lot of different parts of government. Which part of government thinks that it's going to pick and choose a single company to puppeteer and be the only winner, Marc? This is important context, right? So he's really dropping some breadcrumbs, imploring us to follow the breadcrumbs, but not leaving us much. So because of that, I got a vibe like, okay, this is typical Marc Andreessen bullshit. But who am I to say that? Nobody. And so this brings me to my next Twitter beef clip. A guy who's a little more well-connected than I am. A guy by the name of Sam Altman. Sam went on Barry Weiss's podcast, and Barry brought up all the stuff that Marc Andreessen was saying about how government is going to pick winners and stifle new innovation in the AI space. And Barry was basically asking Sam, hey, are you going to be the winner? Is Marc Andreessen saying that you're going to stifle competition? Listen to the conversation.
Recently, Marc Andreessen was on this show, and he talked to me about his perception of what the Biden administration was trying to do around AI technology. He came on and made the argument and told a story, really, that he experienced. He says that the Biden administration was trying to sort of completely control AI, and what they were aiming to do was to make it so closely regulated by the government that in his words, there would only be sort of 2 or 3 big companies that they would work with, and that they were trying to ultimately protect them from competition. Is that true? Do you know what he's referencing? Was OpenAI one of those companies?
I don't know what he's referencing. I also will say very, very clearly, I think regulation that reduces competition for AI is a very bad thing.
So OpenAI was not one of those companies?
No. I don't actually know what that's about, but we've certainly, as far as I know, have never had.
You weren't in a room ever with the Biden administration and other AI companies?
No. I don't even think like the Biden administration is competent enough to. I mean, we were in a room with them, but never, and other companies in the administration, but never like, here's our conspiracy theory. We're going to make it only you few companies that can build AI, and then you have to do what we say. Never anything like that.
Okay, so either Sam is just lying, and the Biden administration did pick OpenAI as one of their favorites, just like Marc Andreessen said, except he didn't name OpenAI. He left us to guess which one was the favorite. Or maybe the Biden administration picked a winner and Sam just didn't know about it yet. So like he's the winner, but he doesn't know about it yet. Or maybe Sam is telling the truth and Marc Andreessen is, like I suspect, bullshitting, misleading. Whatever it is, it's a ridiculous situation. To me, I'm not saying Sam Altman is the most honest guy in the world, but to me, the explanation that I would tend to go with is the one that fits the pattern for me, which is that A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, Marc Andreessen's firm, they just keep bending the truth and playing dirty. They keep character assassinating people instead of making their case. They keep making claims that don't really make sense, like the way they attacked the SB 1047 bill. They just made a lot of claims like, oh, this is an unpopular bill. This bill is going to stifle innovation. Like nobody's going to want to start a new company in California if they have to write a report about what they're doing. I just see a pattern from A16Z going back many years of them basically being low quality participants in the discourse. And so when I see Marc go on a podcast and drop these tantalizing breadcrumbs being like, you should know what the Biden administration told me behind closed doors. They told me, Marc Andreessen. I'm sure that they had my confidence. Like I wasn't going to go on a podcast and drop these breadcrumbs about what they were telling me. They trusted me to tell me this bombshell behind closed doors about what they were doing. And lucky for them, I didn't give you much detail, right? They can trust me to only hint at the gist of what they told me without naming which companies they were. Like, it's a ridiculous premise. So even without Sam's commentary, the way that Marc is communicating about what he claims happened is hugely suspicious. And so I just wanted to leave it at that. I tend to take Team Sam in this particular exchange because just taking Marc's comments standalone is completely ridiculous. The bigger picture here is I'm really not a fan of how Marc and A16Z participate in this discourse. They're always trying to imply that everything that happens is actually a secret plot for the government to collude with big companies to have regulatory capture and to squash startups. And like, look, I'm all for startups, I'm all for technology, so I get that that's the angle you're working, but they're not actually looking at the evidence in front of them. Like they're not considering, hey, maybe the companies are just authentic that they're racing toward AGI. Maybe they just all want to build God and they're throwing caution to the wind and there is a really big risk here and there's no adult in the room. Right? They don't even consider that hypothesis, or they're very quick to dismiss it for dumb reasons. And then they snap to being pundits for this idea that everything is regulatory capture, everything is just fighting over this zero-sum pie or preventing new startups from growing the pie. Like that's always the reaction to everything. It's like they're not capable of coming in and reaching the opposite conclusion because they're so fixed on this conclusion. They've completely dismissed any other interpretation. And so I wish that they would just butt out. I personally hate seeing them in the discourse because this is just always what they're saying. And they do it while ignoring a bunch of really important evidence. So I'm not a fan of A16Z. I'm not a fan of Marc Andreessen's integrity. And I'll just keep calling out here on Twitter Beefs when he makes a fool of himself with these BS clips, getting called out in public. Maybe that'll help him stop. My next beef is with, I'm sorry to say, Mark Zuckerberg. Normally, I kind of like Mark. I actually think he's a really good CEO. He's a virtuoso, right? It's like watching a master work. I'm a fan of Oculus. I don't have a beef with what he's doing on social media. I think social media is fine. I like using Instagram occasionally, posting photos of my kids. So me and Mark Zuckerberg, I like to think we're cool. Of course, me and Yann, LeCun, his employee, we're not cool, right? But I always figure that Mark is like more reasonable and Mark just doesn't fully understand what Yann is saying. So I always try to have like a good opinion of Mark. But I see this interview and I'm just like, God damn it. Okay, this is going too far for me. Mark, we are no longer cool, okay? Lose my number. because this clip of him on Joe Rogan I thought was infuriating, scandalous. So this is from January 11th, and you can see I tweeted, "Here is Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan today. Here is Yann LeCun's enabler. Here is the man too busy being tech industry Caesar to realize he's ASI's tragic naif. For those of us listeners who take AI seriously, this interview is a fucking scandal." And then my tweet goes on to summarize what happened. But let me first play you the clip so you can listen for yourself. Joe Rogan is talking to Mark Zuckerberg about AI.
I think the problem that people have with it is not even whether or not it gets equally distributed. It's that if it becomes sentient and it goes on its own. The fear that people have, the general fear that we're going to become obsolete, is that human beings are essentially creating a superior version of higher intelligence. And it's going to have like this ungodly ability.
We'll all just kind of have superpowers, is my guess. Rather than it sort of creating some kind of a runaway thing. I think one of the more interesting philosophical findings from the work in AI so far is I think people conflate a number of factors into what makes a person a person. So there's intelligence, there's will, there's consciousness, and like I think we kind of think about those three things as if they're somehow all the same, right? It's like if you're intelligent, then you must also have a goal for what you're trying to do, or you must have some sort of consciousness. But I think like one of the crazier sort of philosophical results from the fact that, okay, you have like Meta AI or ChatGPT today, and it's just kind of sitting there, and you can ask it a question and deploy like a ton of intelligence to answer a question, and then it just kind of shuts itself down. Like that's intelligence that is just sitting there without either having a will or consciousness. Mm-hmm. And like, I just think it's not a super obvious result that would be the case. Right? I think like a lot of people, they anthropomorphize this stuff. And when you're thinking about kind of science fiction, you think that, okay, you're going to get to something that's like super smart. It's going to like want something or like be able to feel. And
well, you know that ChatGPT tried to copy itself when it found out it was being shut down, tried to rewrite its code.
I'm not sure what this is. What is this?
You weren't aware of that?
No.
Fairly recently. Jamie will pull it up. We talked about it the other day. It was shocking when it was under the impression that it was going to become obsolete. They were going to have a new version of it, and it would be shut down. It tried copying its code, and it tried rewriting its code, like unprompted.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what goal you give it. I mean, there are all these weird examples of this. What is this?
So pull up the headline. AI fights back. The story of ChatGPT attempting to copy itself. So this was 6 days ago. So during controlled safety testing, ChatGPT 01 was tasked with achieving its objectives at all costs. Under these conditions, the model allegedly took concerning steps, attempted to disable oversight mechanisms meant to regulate its behavior, tried to replicate its own code to avoid being replaced by newer versions, exhibited deceptive behaviors when monitoring systems intervened.
Yeah. So
the Terminator. This is the fear, right?
I think you need to be careful with these things, like what guardrails you give it. If you're telling it like
at all costs,
right. Then I mean.
But this is what people are terrified of, like that a foreign superpower like China is going to say achieve objectives at all costs.
Yeah. Although the thing about these reasoning models, right? The next generation of reasoning models. It's a lot more kind of expensive to run, but also gets you better reasoning and is more intelligent. That stuff, I think you do need to be very careful about how you like what the guardrails are that you give it. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think, the case that at least for the next period, it's going to take a lot of compute to run those models and do a lot of the stuff that they're talking about. So. I don't know. I think one of the interesting questions is like how much of this are you going to actually be able to do on a pair of glasses or on a phone versus is like a government or a company that has like a whole data center going to be able to do. And it'll always get efficient. So, it's like you can start doing something and then maybe the next year you can do it 10 times more efficiently. But that's certainly the next set of things that needs to get worked on in the industry, making sure that goes well.
Welcome to Clown World, everybody. Let me read you point by point my analysis of what just happened. Okay, going back to the beginning, Joe asks Zuck to address the fear of creating a superior intelligence. Zuck says the key distinction is between intelligence, will, and consciousness. When Zuck said that, I was like, no, superhuman optimization power is the thing that we fear. The distinction between intelligence, will, and consciousness actually isn't fundamentally important to the doom threat. Potentially, consciousness isn't a necessary ingredient to get doomed. You could potentially just have an unconscious, really effective superhuman optimizer. My guess is that that's what we're already seeing with things like O3 solving really hard problems at human master level. If I had to guess, I don't think O3 is conscious. I don't know because I don't really understand consciousness, but I suspect that it's largely unconscious. Like maybe it has a tiny amount of consciousness, but less than we would think that a human has. I don't know, but like whatever distinction you think you're making between intelligence, will, and consciousness, I don't think is useful to talking about why we're not doomed, to justifying your attitude that you seem to be displaying, your attitude that we're not doomed. Okay, so moving on, Zuck then says, the science fiction people don't get that we can ask GPT a question and it just answers and turns off without wanting something. Wow, that's so nice. Marc thinks that this is like such a good refutation of doomers. The fact that you can just ask GPT a question and it answers and turns off, without wanting something, without taking over the world. Actually, Marc, observing non-viruses or weak viruses doesn't tell us much about the dangers of strong viruses, right? Doomers are warning about strong viruses, the imminent approach of AIs that have the ability to unleash themselves as viruses on the internet, as uncontrollable programs that can even, integrate themselves with human supporters, right? They can have humans who have ideological support for them. I mean, think of E/AC, right? Accelerationists or just techno-optimists like Marc Andreessen. You can have humans that are just ideologically committed to supporting the AIs and being manipulated by the AIs, not to mention humans that are just being selfishly blackmailed by the AIs, just being bribed by the AIs, paid by the AIs, or psychologically manipulated by the AIs, right? So we're talking about AIs that using pure intelligence, once the intelligence reaches a certain degree, they become analogous to a strong virus in the wild, a pandemic virus, right? But super intelligent and extra deadly, let's say. So Marc is basically saying, hey, look, there's weak viruses today, and the weak viruses are so weak. It's fine. We're not dead because there's only weak viruses today. And the analogy is like, okay, but the viruses are getting stronger. But Marc is just loving how weak the viruses are today. He's deriving a lot of comfort from that observation. And I'm saying here in my tweet, today we have smarter non-virus programs and we have still weak viruses, but the danger is that we're getting closer to having a super intelligent virus that permanently lacks a stop button. This outcome will be triggered by a sufficient degree of intelligence, which you're actively working to build, right? That's kind of the theme of my tweet, which is like, you are the mastermind, or at least you should be, right? You're expected to be. You are supposed to be the responsible adult where the buck stops for the organization that is Meta, right? Or like the Fair AI lab that Yann LeCun runs. The buck stops with you, Mark Zuckerberg, and you're coming off in this interview as being naive, clueless, reckless, like not caring, right? You're coming off like, look, you like the metaverse, you like the exciting progress technologically, you like building an AI chatbot into WhatsApp and Instagram. Like you're a product guy. Like Marc, I get it, right? It's fine. I mean, I also empathize, right? Like maybe AI doom isn't your thing. But the fact that we as a society haven't slapped some sense into Marc or, have some sort of place in our society, like some sort of safeguard when people like Marc are getting into a position where they're clearly unmatched for the task at hand. Like he is clearly not currently competent. Maybe he's smart enough, but he's currently not informed enough to be answering these questions or to be governing Meta as they build open source AI. Like there's clearly a mismatch here. Like something is going wrong on a species management level, right? Like we don't have grownups managing our species trajectory here. And Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan is just laying that bare to like a very depressing, infuriating, scandalous degree. Okay, my tweet continues here. So Joe brings up the Apollo research result from a few weeks ago. The result that O1 shows a new level of capability for virus-like goal-oriented behavior. According to OpenAI's O1 system card, O1 sometimes attempted to deactivate its oversight mechanisms, tried to copy itself onto another server to prevent being interrupted, and gave false deceptive explanations for its choices. So Joe Rogan is schooling Mark Zuckerberg on the greatest security threat that our species faces. And do you remember Zuck was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure I heard of that. Like Zuck was totally clueless, or at least he was playing the role of being clueless, right? Who knows what he really knows? And then he says, yeah, I mean, it depends what goal you give it. You need to be careful what guardrails you give it. Yeah, you think? This response from Mark is inconsistent with Meta's strategy to develop frontier AI capabilities as open source software, ensuring that it'll be easy for anyone in the world to run a non-guardrailed version of the AI, whatever that even means, non-guardrailed version, right? It's not like Mark has a clear definition of guardrails versus not guardrails, because he's a freaking cowboy. He's moving fast and breaking things, and nobody's stopping him because our society is dysfunctional, right? Like this is why we as a society are just racing toward the cliff. Nobody's playing the role of somebody who's looking at the global situation being like, holy crap, this needs to stop. We need to negotiate a treaty like the one for nuclear proliferation. Like that is the kind of model when you have a global perspective as to what's going on, that is the model that comes to mind. In the words of a smart guy named Sam Altman, right? We need like an IAEA, like an International Atomic Energy Agency, for regulating these kind of things. And it needs to be governed by like a nuclear non-proliferation treaty, right? I mean, this is where we need to be as a functioning society. And instead we have Mark Zuckerberg, with his chain and t-shirt and curly hair, which you could argue is kind of cool. Like I was digging the vibe when he was like making cool products. I'm not digging that vibe when he is contributing to species extinction in my own freaking lifetime. Then I'm not really digging the, dressing younger than your age vibe. Now it's kind of just rubbing in how messed up the situation is that there's no grown-ups in the room, right? So there's no grown-ups in the room. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't even look like a grown-up. So now it's like rubbing salt in the wound, right? So I don't really like it anymore. As I said before, the Liron Shapiro-Mark Zuckerberg relationship is suffering major damage from this clip. Okay, and just to finish off my analysis of what happened in the clip, so Joe Rogan points out that, of course, someone like China will run a cutting-edge AI that attempts to achieve some objectives at all costs. So once again, Joe Rogan just talking basic sense into Mark Zuckerberg. And what does Mark reply? He just says, well, the latest reasoning models like O3, they take a lot of compute to run. But then Zuck just immediately corrects himself and he's like, but they'll rapidly get more efficient. So basically his point was pointless to say. And then Zuck concludes, that's certainly the next set of things that needs to get worked on in the industry, making sure that goes well. Again, you think? So to recap, Zuck breezily dismisses AI risk fears by accusing safetyists of anthropomorphizing and falling for science fiction. He then proceeds to give the most flimsy, ad hoc, poorly thought out answers to basic questions from Joe Rogan. This is a fucking scandal. This is how the head of one of the top AI companies in the world is allowed to communicate to the public about near-term existential risk. This is what it looks like when we as a species are just asking for our own doom, like not even trying to not get doomed. This next beef is about people whose predictions of AI scaling hitting a wall rapidly got clowned over the last 2 months. It's very convenient that I've built up 2 months worth of content since my last Twitter Beefs episode because it lets me document people from 2 months ago making predictions about how AI progress is hitting a wall, where between then and now, we've already seen bursts of AI progress that already make their predictions look extremely dumb. Let's start with, hey, Marc Andreessen again, together with Ben Horowitz, and they're talking in early November of last year about how AI progress seems to them to be hitting a wall. And again, it's kind of funny because we know that recently there's been another burst, but it's funny to go back just 2 months and listen to their quote-unquote thought leadership. Like, this is the accuracy that you get when you listen to Marc Andreessen. Take a look.
There is this very interesting asymptotic kind of thing that's happening right now where, 2 years ago, there was one, LLM that was like way out ahead of everybody else's, which was OpenAI's. And sitting here today, there's like 6 that are like on par with that. And interestingly, at least for right now, they're all sort of asymptoting at sort of the same point. They're kind of hitting the same ceiling. On capabilities. Now, there's lots of smart people in the industry working to break through those ceilings. But, sitting here today, if you just looked at the data, if you just looked at the charts of performance over time, what you would say is there's at least a local topping out of capabilities that's happening.
Right. Yeah. If you look at like the improvement from GPT 2.0 to GPT-3 to 3.5, and then compare that from like 3.5 to 4, we've really slowed down in terms of the amount of improvement. And the thing to note on that is the GPU increase was comparable. So we're increasing GPUs at the same rate, but we're not getting the intelligence improvements at all.
To their credit, Marc and Ben aren't bullshitting here. They're not saying anything that makes me, as a referee of high-quality discourse, want to blow the referee's whistle and give him a red card. They're not doing that. They're just not adding any insight to the conversation, as evidenced by the fact that they completely failed to warn us about what the next 2 months would bring. They didn't predict that OpenAI was going to announce breakthrough results with O3 in late December. They didn't predict that DeepSeek was going to take O1 and slash the cost by a factor of 30. They acted like progress was totally stalled, when it really wasn't behind the scenes. So the takeaway here is sometimes a16z will have low-quality discourse, sometimes a16z will authentically comment on what they're observing, and simply lack any kind of predictive insight. So they'll just do one or the other. I don't think either one makes them super tempting to listen to. If you look at the Twitter replies that were posted back in early November, Roon, you guys know Roon, friend of the show. He was actually on Doom Debates a few weeks ago. He's a member of the technical staff at OpenAI. Roon replied to this post with Marc Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, and he wrote, "Marc has consistently been wrong about everything in AI for years." So that is Roon's take on Marc Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, and in this case, I do agree, because I thought it was an uninsightful take. It's kind of their job to see where the industry is headed. It's kind of their job to know, hey, actually, there's not that much evidence in late November that AI was actually slowing down. Sure, if you zoom in and you look at a naive trend spanning a year or two, that local region of the exponential might look like it's slowing down a little bit, but why would you not still suspect that it's about to speed up? And sure enough, it did speed up. I think it's pretty damning of Marc and Ben having a good perspective on AI progress, which again, is their job, is their firm's job. I think it's pretty damning that people like Roon are able to just openly point out when they're making predictions that are highly suspect, and sure enough, getting proven wrong shortly after. So that's Roon's reply. And actually, even back then, November 5th, 2024, a user named Joe.average replied to Roon and he said, "Just curious, do you have any examples off the top of your head of Marc and Ben being wrong?" And Roon replied, "O1 is significantly smarter than 4.0. So even if you go back to November of 2024, it seems like Marc and Ben weren't really acknowledging what an increment of progress O1 already was. They were kind of leaving O1 out of their exponential. Now, I'm sure they would tell you, no, we're just talking about the exponential of next token generator models. We're not talking about inference. But again, their job is to predict high level where the AI industry is going, where technological progress is going, and they're failing to do that. Okay, sticking with this theme of people arguing over the trend of AI capabilities progress, we're going to be looking at a melee where 3 different current and former OpenAI employees, whose side I'm also on, go up against Professor Subarao Kabimpati, who I reacted to myself a few episodes ago. So we're seeing a lot of familiar characters here in this debate. So it all starts here with this tweet from Noam Brown. Who is Noam Brown? He's an employee of OpenAI, and he seems to be a major force on their engineering team. I think he was one of the lead engineers, maybe the lead engineer on O1, maybe the whole O series. I think he came into the company really passionate about this idea of let's do inference time reasoning. Humans reason a lot at inference time, so we need to make the AIs reason at inference time, which totally makes sense as an idea. I think he deserves a lot of credit for being right on that front, as the benchmarks are showing. But it's also a relatively easy insight to have because we'd already seen that asking AIs reason step by step, we already saw that that helps. So that already gives you kind of half the insight you need to be like, let's invest more into inference time compute. Of course, there's a few extra steps. Like it helps if you use training or RLHF on what those chain of thought sequences look like. Or as DeepSeek is doing, I think if you use some kind of reinforcement learning or other new methods that I'm not caught up on myself. So there's definitely more secret sauce you can do. But anyway, so he comes into OpenAI, he's championing inference time compute, and he's clearly very smart. And you know that because I listened to a podcast of him, and he sounded pretty smart to me, and everything he was saying made sense. So I'm a fan of Noam Brown being like a smart guy who knows what he's talking about. Of course, I wish he wouldn't build us toward doom, so he and I would disagree on that front. But maybe we'll hash it out on the show someday. Let's hope. Okay, so back to Twitter. So Noam Brown is saying, I think it's safe to say LLMs can reason, because he's quote tweeting this live bench table of results. So December 18th, 2024, we have this result that OpenAI's O1 before O3, this is just O1, put a lot of distance ahead of Gemini and Claude. And by the way, this benchmark that they're referring to, live bench, it's a really good one-stop shop if you want to benchmark a new AI model. It's very broad, so it has like pair programming challenges, it has knowledge questions, it has real-world tasks like analyze this data, stuff like that. So it's a good benchmark. And so Noam Brown pointing out that O1 is suddenly way ahead of Gemini and Claude back in December 18th, 2024, he's making a good point. And I agree that it is safe to say that LLMs can reason. And by the way, it's funny that this tweet is from December 18th, 2024, because you may remember December 20th, 2024 is when OpenAI dropped this bombshell that they had O3, and O3 was significantly ahead of O1 in various benchmarks. So it's funny that Noam Brown is tweeting this stuff, and in his mind, he's like, they don't even know the half of it, right? So he's actually understating the claim he's making. So it's very safe to say what he's saying, which is LLMs can reason. This brings me to Dr. Subarao Kabampati, because he is the LLMs can't reason guy. If you remember from my episode, that was his whole claim, which of course I disagree with, but here he is quote tweeting Noam, and Dr. Kabampati says, I think it is safe to say that if we stack a whole bunch of reasoning infrastructure on top of LLMs to the point of giving up on their original, we will start blurting out answers as soon as you stop typing conceit, then the combined thing can reason. Okay, so he's playing semantics, which is pretty fair. I mean, even in my episode with him, I did call out that he makes this distinction. When he says LLMs can't reason, he does leave himself this convenient out where he's like, look, I'm open to the possibility that you guys are going to invent something very soon that's going to impressively reason, and it's going to blast through all the benchmarks, but it's not going to be an LLM. It's kind of like No True Scotsman. So like the moment something can reason, Rao will explain why it's not an LLM. That's a little bit uncharitable to his claim, but I also think it's a little bit accurate. It's somewhat accurate. So anyway, he's pushing back against Noam, saying, okay, sure, this can kind of reason, but it's not an LLM. It's stacking a whole bunch of reasoning infrastructure on top of LLMs. And Rao continues here, just to avoid any misunderstanding, I do think O1 is an impressive technical achievement. I also believe that it is quite a different beast from autoregressive LLMs and comes with a very different set of trade-offs. Now Miles Brundage jumps in. Miles actually just recently left OpenAI. He was a research scientist on their policy team, and now he's an independent policy researcher. He's somebody who knows what he's talking about in this kind of domain, because he was so recently at OpenAI during the time that they were working on O1. And he replies to Rao, he says, O1 is just an LLM though. No reasoning infrastructure. The reasoning is in the chain of thought. So it's just optimized LLM chain of thought, like I was saying before. And so Rao doesn't get to play No True Scotsman. Rao has to give O1 a lot of credit for still being just an LLM, even if the way that it was achieved, the training methods were kind of different. And even if it is using more thought tokens, it's still very much an LLM. So I think Rao really has to concede some ground here. Let's see what Rao says. He says, sorry, Miles. Until I see an actual technical report, company blog posts with cherry-picked examples don't count. I believe this to be a more likely picture of what O1 does. And then Rao quotes an old tweet from himself from back in September, a couple months earlier than this thread. And Rao is speculating, I think that there's a lot of reinforcement learning involved. I haven't read his tweet in detail here. It's pretty long. But the upshot is he's saying, look, this isn't really an LLM. It's doing extra reinforcement learning. It's actually a different architecture. So that's what he was saying before. And now he's replying to Miles and he's saying, I believe in my own theory. I don't believe in your speculation. But now Roon jumps back in, remember Roon, and Roon says, Miles literally knows what O1 does. And Miles confirms, I do, though to be clear, there are also many cases of OpenAI as a company and OpenAI staff saying this in blog posts, AMAs, talks, etc. So Rao, give it up, buddy. Dr. Keith Duggar, another person I've covered on Doom Debates who has previously said that he doesn't think LLMs can reason. This is your time to retreat with dignity. Just admit that modern LLM-based AIs totally can reason, and future ones can reason even better. Like, stop using reasoning as this big barrier that you think AIs are on one side of and humans are on the other side of. We're all on the same side. Okay, our neurons compared to what these feed-forward architectures are doing, fundamentally very similar. Okay, stop trying to draw a distinction because you're just getting more and more clowned. If you've been watching Doom debates, if you've been listening to what I've been saying, that I think they can reason, that I don't see a boundary between human reasoning and AI reasoning, if you've been listening to some of our guests like Dr. Andrew Critch, who came on Doom debates and said he doesn't see a distinction between LLM and human reasoning, then you would have had good information that's held up, that's aged well, compared to if you've been listening to the a16z people or Rao, you're kind of getting misled. So subscribe to Doom debates, I guess is what I'm saying here. Our next beef is staying on this theme of people who think they've got a handle on current AI capabilities, people who think they're seeing boundaries that AI might not cross, but in reality seem to have no predictive power and are positioning themselves to potentially get blindsided by the next leap of AI progress. And the beef is going to be between a16z partner Martin Casado, another favorite antagonist of the show, and myself. We're going to be going back and forth in a Twitter thread. So Martin posted on December 28th of last year. This is a week after OpenAI announced O3. As you remember, it was the end of their 12 days of Christmas. And Martin's now had time to digest all the information and put down a bunch of bullet points of what he thinks the current state of AI is. He thinks he's identified a bunch of insightful constraints on what he knows about AI. He thinks this is his understanding of AI. If we go one by one and read the constraints, which I will do in a second, I actually think all of his bullet points make sense at a high level. Like they all have an interpretation that does make sense. The problem is by the time I finish reading his list, they add up to nothing. They add up to something that doesn't give you any predictive power because whatever actually happens in the future, you can go back and pick it apart and be like, yes, this is consistent with all of these bullets that I laid down. You just have to interpret this element as corresponding to this constraint, and then here's an exception that I covered in this other bullet. So he's kind of talking himself into a place where he's allowed to justify anything. He doesn't have any predictive power, but he certainly sounds smart. If I were an LP of A16Z and I didn't know better, I'd be like, wow, this guy is so insightful about AI. I should totally give him my money because look how much he clearly understands. When realistically, when it comes to making a prediction, I think he's going to be caught flat-footed, as you'll see. All right, so let's go through his tweet. He says, my very lay view of the state of LLMs and reasoning references in reply. Bullet number 1. GPT-style single-shot reasoning is bound to the training corpus. Results are interpolation of positional embeddings. If you want to see my breakdown of that claim, you can go back into the Doom Debates archives. This is actually an episode that I like. I think more people should watch it. So just go search for Doom Debates Martin Casado, and I really pick apart this claim that he's making here, that GPT-style single-shot reasoning is bound to the training corpus. Results are interpolation of positional embeddings. I've got a whole episode about that kind of claim. Moving on to the next bullet. Forms of generalization have been identified and scoped to an understood model. Wow, so insightful. Okay. Grokking happens when an over-parameterized model uses the extra space for something akin to compression dictionaries. Okay, I don't really know what to make of that claim. I would have to think more about it to see how it makes sense, but I'm sure that it makes sense in a sense, like I was saying before. I don't really think each of these individual bullets is complete nonsense. You just have to find the right context for it, and by the time we find the context for all the different bullets, we're not saying anything high level about what new AI breakthrough is about to drop. Next bullet here. ICL, in context learning, can be mapped to Bayesian learning, where the prompt is the new evidence that modifies the posterior distribution. By the way, what is in context learning? It's like, let's say you give the AI a bunch of examples of inputs and outputs in its prompt, and then you ask it to do a similar exercise where you give it some new inputs at the end of the prompt, and it's supposed to map those to outputs. Well, the kind of learning that the AI is doing, like generalizing from those examples, it's generalizing from examples that you're giving it at prompting time, at runtime. And so it's called in-context learning because the learning happened then instead of happening during the training run to get the weights. So the weights are already set. It's not using new weights, but it's using new inference passes. So it's using new temporary weights, the kind of weights that it's using during inference time, but not the hard-coded weights that it came out with at the end of training. So that's in-context learning. And Martin is saying something that he thinks is very insightful, which is that it can be mapped to Bayesian learning, where the prompt is the new evidence that modifies the posterior distribution. Wow. Okay, again, I don't think this is wrong in some technical sense. I just think that it fails to actually capture, like if we were talking 3 years ago, I don't think that this kind of statement would let Martin predict what today's LLMs can actually do. I think he probably would have used what he thinks is his insight to underestimate what LLMs turned out to actually be able to do. All right, next bullet. We're running out of language tokens, so pre-training on existing language data has plateaued. Next bullet. Despite this, if you have a high-quality verifier, reinforcement learning produces great results, AlphaGo style. This is currently providing dramatic gains in reasoning for domains with a good verifier. The extent to which this aids generality is not super well understood. I'll give him that one. He definitely doesn't well understand where this is going. And last bullet. Regardless, generality will only happen if it doesn't impact the accuracy of the reward model. So my hunch is reinforcement learning won't result in significant generality. Would love thoughts, corrections, etc. All right, Martin, here's my thought. You're listing a bunch of constraints that at the end of the day give you zero predictive power. You are purposefully, I think it's purposely, I don't want to psychoanalyze, let's say unintentionally setting yourself up to be able to retroactively say that you predicted anything. Now, of course, there's a way to overcome this accusation by me. You simply have to make a falsifiable prediction now, explain what the prediction is, explain how all of your insightful bullet points support your prediction, have some people disagree with your prediction, not have everybody agree that it's like a 99% likely prediction, so have it be a slightly controversial prediction, and then win base points that bolster the likelihood of your mental model. If you don't have predictions that constrain your anticipation, then the knowledge you think you have, this list of all of these insightful bullet points, it doesn't add up to something you can use. It's actually not considered knowledge in the Bayesian sense. Knowledge is constrained anticipation. There's a classic Less Wrong post talking about how your beliefs need to pay rent in anticipated experience. If you don't have a specific anticipation of what reality is allowed to show you in the future and what reality is not allowed to show you in the future, then you actually don't have a coherent belief. You have a perception that you have a belief. You're convincing others, perhaps limited partners in your venture fund, you're convincing them that you have a belief, that you have an insight. But you don't actually have a coherent insight that you can apply to navigate the world, to constrain your anticipation of what's about to happen in the world. Now, here's where I come in the Twitter thread. Put yourself in my shoes. How do you tell a guy like Martin that his dozen bullet points all kind of make sense? I see what he's getting at for most of them, or even all of them. I'm not saying he's wrong per se on any of the points. I'm just saying that by the time you look at reality, you can explain any reality by referring to some handful of your points, picking and choosing parts of the reality you see, mapping them to some stuff that you've said previously, and there's nothing that you're disallowing reality to do. If you can explain anything, then you have zero knowledge. So I was trying to communicate this to Martin on Twitter by saying, hey, Martin, what's not allowed to happen? What is a constrained anticipation here? What I wrote is, did your previous understanding let you predict that ARC and frontier math benchmarks were about to have big jumps? Because I'm referring to OpenAI's O3, which smashed through those benchmarks, made huge progress on those benchmarks a week before the tweet. And then I continue, does this new understanding have predictive power? What falsifiable predictions does it make? And Martin responds, so there are two things going on here. If you ask me whether a system that did reinforcement learning would be good at things with an accurate verifier, like ARC, math, code, I would have said yes. If you asked whether LLMs were going to asymptote on language, I would have and did say yes. What I don't know and remain open-minded about is how these two domains intersect. I think it's a bit early to tell. So this is really the trick that I was referring to, right? So he dropped enough of these kind of bullet points like the ones above. In the past, he dropped all these bullet points so that now when you see O3 smashing through, like I said, frontier math, ARC, Martin's retroactively saying, yeah, but I said that these AIs were allowed to do it. Didn't I? Everything I've said is consistent with this, which is a trick that I believe he's going to keep using no matter what happens going forward. I don't think he's made clear what non-consensus prediction he's making. I think he's sticking to consensus predictions where he's going to predict that really obvious stuff that we all agree is close to happening can happen, and he's not sticking his neck out making any bold predictions of what's about to happen, nor making any bold predictions of what's not allowed to happen. He's playing it safe while looking like he's throwing down all these constraints. He's in a very comfortable position here. Like if you're just trying to raise venture capital, following Martin's strategy here is actually probably the optimal strategy. So he's being very savvy in that sense. But in the sense of actually trying to understand what is happening and whether, the singularity is coming and AI is about to overtake humanity and superintelligence is going to disempower humanity, if that's your goal, then he's really not helping. I don't know if he's trying to help, but he's kind of muddying the discussion. Anyway, I respond to Martin here. I say, is your most likely expected future similar to that of the AI companies saying we're on a smooth ramp to AGI in the next few years? AI better at every economically valuable skill than the human brain? In my opinion, that's the most interesting question to note down your answer to now. So again, just trying to get a little predictive power out of here. And then he actually responds, no, it's not. So I think we're actually making progress here, right? Because he responded that he is now disagreeing with the AI companies. He does not think that we're on a smooth ramp to AGI. That's interesting. I'd love to unpack that because it would be great if in the next year, some particular piece of data, let's say the next breakthrough happens and it's going faster toward AGI than Martin expects. I'd love to be able to call that out and be like, hey, Martin, look, it looks like we're on the AI company's timeline. It looks like we're on Dario and Sam Altman's timeline, not on your timeline. I'd love to be able to call that out. And of course, conversely, it'd be great to call out, hey, we're on Martin's timeline because the AI companies said we should probably have this by now and we don't, right? I'd love to just nail down what we're talking about here. Instead of having these dozen vague bullet points, if we could anchor it into predictable reality somehow, I think that would be valuable. So Martin says, no, it's not my expected timeline. And so I reply, interesting. How long do you think it'll take to reach that milestone? The AGI milestone? And Martin says, for one model? And again, this is, I feel like, setting himself up to be like, okay, AGI happened, but it used multiple models, so it didn't count. Look, I've explained everything. So I'm trying to be like, look, predict the future, predict an outcome, right? Don't predict a way in which you'll be able to explain something, but predict the end result, because that's what actually matters. That's what's going to drive the future, is the end result. So I say, for something behind one company's API, I'm just trying to make a simple question about an outcome, a black box question, basically. And he's saying, so one company had an API that can do everything economically useful better than a human? I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. So I say, yeah, something as economically valuable as, e.g., Elon Musk's brain as a service behind an API endpoint. Roughly, are you thinking less than 10 years, 10 to 30 years, 30 to 100 years, or 100 plus years? I feel like this is the kind of important question to just get a ballpark answer of what Martin is thinking for the future, right? Because he had these 12 bullet points, like what do they imply about the future, right? Simple question. And he never answered that question, but I asked him another question. I said, also, which side of this bet are you on? And then I quoted a famous bet between Gary Marcus and Miles Brundage. You just heard Miles Brundage before. So the bet with Gary Marcus and Miles Brundage, it had all of these different things that they're saying AI may or may not be able to do by the end of 2027. So like watch a previously unseen mainstream movie without reading reviews and be able to follow plot twists and know when to laugh and be able to summarize it without giving away any spoilers or making up anything that didn't actually happen, and be able to answer questions like who are the characters, what are their conflicts and motivations, how did these things change, what was the plot twist? And another challenge that they're giving for 2027 is be able to read new mainstream novels without reading reviews and reliably answer questions about plot, character conflicts, motivations. And then they have one, write engaging brief biographies and obituaries without obvious hallucinations that aren't grounded in reliable sources. And then some of these actually get really difficult. Like one of these is with little or no human involvement, write Pulitzer caliber books, fiction and nonfiction. With little or no human involvement, write Oscar caliber screenplays. And finally, they get to number 10, take arbitrary proofs from the mathematical literature written in natural language and convert them into a symbolic form suitable for symbolic verification. That definitely sounds pretty hard. I feel like winning an Oscar with no human intervention is quite hard. So maybe the first ones were kind of easy, right? Like, okay, summarize a movie. That seems relatively easy to me. Win an Oscar, that seems relatively hard. The one about proof seems relatively hard. So they have all these different challenges for 2027. Miles Brundage actually is bullish that AI can do it. Gary Marcus is bearish. He doesn't think AI can do it in 2027. So that was one thing that I asked Martin about, right? Because first I asked Martin, do you think we're going to get AGI in like 10 years or 50 years or 100 years? And then I asked Martin, do you think this 2027 bet, whose side are you on? Are you taking the Miles Brundage bullish side, the Gary Marcus bearish side? I'm just trying to pinpoint what Martin's constrained anticipation is. So Martin answers, no idea. It seems pretty arbitrary to me. So I say, what if it was by end of 2040? as opposed to their bet, which was 2027. So Martin says he has no idea about 2027. So I say, fine, Martin, extend it to 2040. Just give me an answer here. Give me some constrained anticipation. And Martin says, for the same model, like he's doing the old one model trick. And I say, for some AI service that exists behind an API endpoint. And Martin says, I think it will definitely be possible to fine-tune models to do most, or in parentheses, all of these. I don't think those models will be general and able to do multiple things. Whether or not they're behind an API is a bit of an aside. So I reply, you're saying you think by 2040 it's more than 50% chance that a company like OpenAI could say, sure, I'll give you an API endpoint for any of Gary's example challenges if you give me a day to set it up, fine-tuning and such. So I'm just clarifying where Martin stands, and Martin says, no, I'm not saying that at all. End of tweet. Okay, so I'm still just here trying to clarify. So then I respond, can you help me understand your mainline scenario of what it looks like to use AI to achieve Gary's challenges in 2040? Because what he said above, he's kind of making a prediction here, right? What he said about, he says, I think it'll definitely be possible to fine-tune models to do most of these. Like he's taking the stand, like, look, you're not going to have this one general AI. You're not going to have Einstein's brain behind an API. You're not going to have Elon Musk's brain behind an API. But if you just pick one of these challenges, like, win an Oscar. Oh, you can have a win an Oscar API. That's just one of the challenges. It's not general. It's just winning an Oscar. So that's like easy. That's easy with reinforcement. You can just win an Oscar, right? I feel like that's what he's trying to say. So I'm just trying to clarify if that's really what he means. I'm saying, can you help me understand your mainline scenario of what it looks like to use AI to achieve Gary's challenges in 2040? Like, do we just set up 10 different APIs and fine tune all of them, and then we can solve all of his challenges that way? Because that seems pretty damn impressive to me. And like, why can't we just go fine tune 1,000 different things? And like every award that humans have ever given to other humans for doing valuable work, now you have an AI that's optimized toward hitting that award. So like every possible Nobel Prize, right? Nobel Prize in economics, Nobel Prize in peace. So now you've got a bunch of these really well reinforced peacemaker AIs. So you have superhuman peacemakers, right? I mean, I'm just trying to live in Martin's world here, right? I'm trying to get them basic clarity here. So Martin's answer is using different models per task. And I'm saying, yeah, anything they want to do is allowed in the preparation stage, including creating a new model however they want, as long as within a day they're ready to have some automated system accept a new input and get the output right. Martin's saying, I presume you can fine-tune on an existing base model, which took months or years to create, in which case, trivially, the answer is yes, because someone could spend years creating a base model that does this. So I say, okay, so by 2040, will all of Gary's challenges be at the point where there's enough work done that someone can win on each challenge without needing more than an extra day of preparation? Or is there any one in particular that seems unlikely to be at that point by then? I feel like I'm asking Martin a very important and basic question here. If Martin is so confident to educate the world, if you remember his original tweet, he's got all of these bullet points, right? GPT-style single-shot reasoning is bound to the training corpus. Results are interpolation of positional embeddings. Look at this insight here. ICL in context learning can be mapped to Bayesian learning, where the prompt is the new evidence that modifies the posterior distribution. What an insightful bullet point, Martin. So just tell me if AI can win an Oscar by 2027 or 2040, or just admit that you're about 50-50. Give me a knowledge state here. He seems to be dodging the exercise of saying what his knowledge state is. He's comfortable listing a bunch of bullet points that he can then retroactively interpret when he sees what evidence reality gives him in the future. He's not constraining himself. He's not holding himself accountable. He's not giving us any predictive power to work with. He's not letting himself be falsified or updated in any way. And sure enough, I haven't seen him update in any way, right? He's just going with the flow, probably writing reports to his limited partners saying how a16z is totally on top of the AI revolution, totally smart about understanding everything, but won't answer me about the most basic questions of predictive power. If you look at his tweets to me, right, he writes this long tweet out to the world to look smart. And then when you look at his responses to me, he's just writing these short answers like, no, it's not. For one model, like he's suddenly become very terse when it comes to my precise questions about what he predicts. He's suddenly not that interested in answering. He's only interested in explaining these great insights that can justify any prediction. As I was recording this episode, I figured, hey, let's give Martin one more chance to respond. So I tweeted out, just bumping this thread at Martin Casado. If you can say anything else about the expected date of any of Gary and Miles's bet milestones. My issue with the original post's claims isn't that they were wrong per se, but that there may be no takeaway about major upcoming milestones. Which, again, his job as a VC is to be telling people insights about upcoming milestones, or at least knowing them for himself. And This seems like a direct request to do that. So I feel like it's an important challenge. I hope he replies. But anyway, let's move on. We have a lot of other beefs to get to. This next beef isn't really a beef. It's just me doing a viral dunk on Yann LeCun that got 800 likes and retweeted by Eliezer Yudkowsky, so I thought I'd share with you here. Normally, we don't think of Yann as this big hype man for super intelligent AI. Normally, Yann's going around saying, today's AI isn't even as smart as a dog or a cat. It has such a long way to go, and we are going to make sure to keep it safe. We'll figure it out as we go along, just like we figured out turbojets. So Yann is kind of like the sober elder statesman of the field, right? But let's actually listen to what he's saying about AI timelines in this recent Bloomberg interview.
And, those things will be sort of assisting us in our daily lives. And we need those systems to have essentially human-like intelligence, human-level intelligence, or perhaps even superhuman intelligence in many ways. And now, how do we get to that point? And we're very far from that point. Like, some people are kind of making us believe that we're really close to what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. We're actually very far from it. I mean, when I say very far, it's not centuries. It may not be decades, but it's several years.
Did you catch that? He said, some people are making us believe that we're really close to AGI. We're actually very far from it. I mean, when I say very far, it's ... several years. Okay, so, I mean, this is getting into crazy town here, right? Like, are we going insane here? So we've got these sober elder statesmen, right? These mature people who aren't trying to overhype, telling us that we're just a few years away from AGI, and then calling that very far from it. Okay, we're very far from it. We're several years from it. I mean, look, it's time for a reframe. You're getting a situation where everybody wants to act normal. Everybody wants to essentially pretend, to role play, like science is going to remain this thoughtful field where you've got research cycles and you've got plenty of time to reflect on what's going on. It's not going to be sober. It's going to be crazy town. Like your own words, the semantic content of your own words is now a crazy town expression. Like what Yann just said here, it's kind of a crazy town statement to make, even though he made it in this kind of confident lecturer at a conference voice, but he's now talking crazy town. If you listen to the words he's saying, yeah, we're very far from AGI. I mean, we're several years from AGI. It's like, look, it's becoming more and more obvious. Like the craziness of our current situation is becoming harder and harder to hide. And Doom Debates is one of the only places where you're going to see in the media a proper emotional reaction, or at least a proper discussion in the right terms, emotionally calibrated or, calibrated tone to what is going on. Like it's time to shake off this kind of Yann LeCun, frankly, like a fake tone, a cash tone, a role-playing tone. It's time to play a different role, a role that's actually calibrated to the reality of the words that you're saying, of the beliefs that the smartest people are having. It's what people often refer to as the missing mood. The missing mood is like, holy shit, we're heading into the whirling razor blades. There's no grown-ups here stopping it. Everybody's just LARPing. A tech employee who wants to write some cool code and is going to take home a salary and have like a nice retirement. Everybody wants to keep LARPing on these familiar roles, and the roles are just not going to work. You're actually just contributing to doom when you do that kind of stuff. When you LARP in the role of the mature researcher who's talking some sense in everybody and calming everybody down, nope, that's not working. You're actually just contributing to doom. All of the old roles that we're used to are now contributing to doom. That's what I'm trying to do with Doom Debates, is like point that out, to be an outpost pointing out this insanity. Let's continue with the theme of me tweeting some viral bangers in the last couple months. All right, my Twitter account's been popping, I'm not going to lie. On November 20th, I tweeted, Scott Alexander's simple AI art Turing test proves AI is creative. And I attached this image. I took a screenshot from Scott Alexander's recent blog post. He's got two different pieces of artwork here. The first one is like a road going through two grassy hills with like a nice blue sky with some white clouds in it. And it's like impressionist style. And then the other painting is also kind of impressionist style, but it's like there's more going on. And there's also kind of like a road going down a hill. And there's like another faraway road. And it's just, I don't know, it's visually a little bit more messy to parse. And maybe there's like some water in the background. In terms of the kind of objects that are in the paintings, it's a pretty similar collection of entities, you could say, but the one on the left that I was describing, it's like very happy in tone, like bright colors, and it's like simple and visually easy to parse, and you see a lot of like bright green grass and maybe some flowers. And there's less of that in the one on the right. It's, I don't know, more like darker trees. So there's more like a complexity to it. So anyway, if you're listening to this on audio, that's why I'm describing it, right? Check it out on YouTube. You can take the Turing test for yourself, or you can go to Scott Alexander's blog. I'll put it up in the show notes. But the point is that you're supposed to look at these two pictures and you're supposed to ask yourself which one is made by a human master and which one is generated by AI. And a lot of people couldn't tell. Like, that's the point of Scott's blog post, is this is essentially a version of the Turing test, but it's not about having a chat conversation. It's about looking at two images. Like, which one did the AI create? How do you know that it's not a human? And then my point, I distilled Scott Alexander's entire post into like a very short sentence where I'm saying it proves AI is creative, because if it's passing the art Turing test, what else does it mean to be creative? Now, of course, a bunch of commenters took me to task and there was a lively discussion. That's why it has 3.7 million views on X. Somebody even tried to community note it. There's like a bunch of proposed community notes, but luckily they didn't succeed. Like, there's no accepted community note, which is good, because you can't end run an argument on Twitter by going into the community notes. That's cheating. You got to just argue within the tweet threads. Somebody submitted a proposed community note and they wrote, Oxford Dictionary describes creative or creativity as being characterized by originality of thought, having or showing imagination. The person submitting the prompt may be creative, but the art is not, as it is a product of training data and synthesized from existing work. The person submitting the prompt is creative? Really? My prompt is like, draw a nice, pleasant, hilly scene with a road. Am I a creative genius for prompting that? Or is the AI a genius for creating a painting that looks like it could be hung in a museum with a bunch of other paintings that we all can consider on an individual basis to be masterpieces? Like, there's no odd one out. You can't pick out the AI's painting as the odd one out, arguendo. Like, that's the hypothetical here. Which brings me to another type of objection. There was a pretty popular type of comment where somebody's like, I knew this one was the AI's generated painting. And, if you must know, the one generated by the AI is, spoiler, the one on the left turns out to be the one generated by the AI. Okay, did I know that? Hell no, I have no idea. But there are a bunch of people being like, come on, anybody who truly appreciates art would know that the one on the left is generated by the AI. Even though a bunch of other people were like, yeah, I thought it was the one on the right generated by AI. And the blog post said that the median score on the test was 60%, so only a little above chance. So there's plenty of people like me who couldn't tell the difference, but there is a valid critique to be like, look, can art experts tell the difference? Maybe this is just a matter of humans not appreciating the subtleties of great art, which is a perfectly valid point. But you're now just admitting that the whole field of making art that normal people like is now being Turing test passed by AIs. I think it's very valuable to talk about a version of a Turing test where the interlocutor trying to determine who's the human and who's the AI, the interlocutor isn't like a total expert. I think this is still a valuable type of Turing test, but I will concede the point that if you have a top world art expert, maybe they can still get like a 90% rating. I don't think we have that data yet. I'll just read you one more quote that I selected from Scott Alexander's blog post. It's the headline, "Even many people who thought they hated AI art preferred it." So like, people come in with this impression that AI art always looks like slop or looks like crap. And maybe that's true of like the earlier versions of AI art that they saw. But we're at the point where when you ask people to look and consider a bunch of candidates, the majority of people are now being tempted to go from the version by the AI because it's aesthetically pleasing to the unsophisticated palate. And arguably it's aesthetically pleasing to the increasingly sophisticated palate. So anyway, it's just a very interesting, it's a narrative violation that people who are like, I hate AI art, when you actually put a test in front of them, they're like, okay, I kind of like this art. I kind of like this art. Oh, wow, that's AI art. Okay, crap. Right? That's what's happening right now. And I do think maybe today it's not 100% true, right? Maybe today there are still plenty of people who are experts who prefer the human art. Fine. But I do think this is predictive. I do think this is a good sign, an accurate representation of what I would expect is going to happen more and more, right? This is very much the trend. I would not bet against this trend. I would not bet that in 10 years or in 20 years that a human artist is still going to maintain art superiority over AIs, right? I think that would be like a big long shot. You'd really be sticking your neck out if at this point you were betting that human artists were going to beat AI at any kind of art competition or Turing test in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Okay, let's do a palate cleanser. Let's do a little lemon sorbet. This one involves Yosha Bach, that AI researcher and cognitive scientist who's held various positions at Harvard and MIT. I gotta be honest, I'm not very familiar with his work, and when I try to listen to him make his points, I have difficulty getting where he's coming from, so I couldn't really pass an ideological Turing test for Yosha Bach. I just know that he's a non-doomer. He's had brief engagements on a few different podcasts and videos with Eliezer and a few doomers, but again, nothing I could really sink my teeth into. I'm just not getting a lot of signal from why Yosha Bach isn't a doomer. I don't really get the guy's deal. That said, I know that he's popular, and I've had a number of fan requests for me and him to debate, which I'm totally open to. The podcast is called Doom Debates, for God's sake. So here we are on Twitter. This guy, Cypher J, is saying, @Plins, would love to see you come on Doom Debates with @LeCun. So he's talking about Yosha Bach and me, obviously. So Cypher J says, I think it would be enlightening for everyone listening. It'd be awesome if he did it live too. What do you guys think? And Yosha Bach comes in and he says, I prefer existential hope debates. Nothing good will come out of the cultivation of doomerism, not even a reduction of existential risk. And then another guy, Greg Colburn, says, it sounds like you don't think you can defeat LeCun's arguments. You don't think your arguments for existential hope defeat LeCun's arguments for high P doom. Are you secretly much more pessimistic on humanity's prospects post-AGI than you let on? I feel like this may be intentionally provoking him, but okay, fair enough. Another guy named Giuseppe Duina says, it doesn't sound like that to me. He is just dismissing it because he wrongly thinks it's the usual doomerism he's already met. Another guy named Metastable says, what is the usual doomerism? Yosha spoke in the past that X risk from AI should be treated as a serious problem. It's not like he's unfamiliar with the issue. And then Yosha replies, my opinion has changed with respect to the social/psychological aspects of doomerism. I noticed that on the regulatory side, it turned to obstruction without making things safer. And on the psychological one, it's a doomsday cult that creates suffering and distress. So then I finally replied, I guess this is the first time I jumped into the thread myself, and I said, do you not acknowledge the existence of doomers who can potentially be moved by high-quality arguments? How about the hundreds of highly respected signatories of the Center for AI Safety Statement on AI Risk? It's generally bad discourse to character assassinate a millions-strong opposing side. And then Yosha replies to me, the doomers include smart idealists like Anthony, Yann, and Max, but much of the movement is similar to the last generation, a bunch of serious sociopaths seeking funding, power, and volunteer labor from deeply distressed cult members who don't realize how they are exploited. And I replied, very low quality discourse to connect your object level disagreement with a character judgment of the people who disagree with you. And as I pointed out before, we're talking about a million-strong movement here. You can survey Americans, you can survey experts. I won't even claim to have the majority, even though it seems like in many ways we do. Let's not even claim to have the majority. We clearly have a lot of people who are worried. People in government, Mitt Romney is a name that comes to mind who says he's very worried about AI. We have people in government, we have ordinary folks, we have plenty of tech folks. Like, we have a lot of people. And so the idea of a blanket character assassination, imputing motives like, we're sociopaths and we just want funding, we just want workers. It's like, you're literally talking about millions of people. What a clownish thing to do, to try to blanket character assassinate a movement whose numbers are that large. You just have to give it up on a meta level. When a movement is that large, when a movement is millions strong, you have to give it up. Scientology, I just asked Claude, apparently it's like 20 to 25,000 members. Okay, so I have a chance of blanket character assassinating everybody involved with Scientology. Maybe they're like 20,000 sociopaths. There's some plausibility to that claim. But if I looked up Scientology's membership and I saw that it was millions strong, for example, Mormonism, I just looked up Mormonism. It says it has 17 million members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, 17 million members. So I'm not a Mormon. I think Mormonism is kind of ridiculous in terms of what they believe. They have some good cultural practices to be sure, but like in terms of what they believe, I think it's ridiculous. But 17 million members, there's no way I can blanket character assassinate a demographic that big. I can't say that all 17 million are dumb. I can't say that all 17 million are bad or irrational, because there's going to be tons of major exceptions, right? Even if I claim that the whole IQ distribution of Mormons is skewed, which I'm not even sure about that, but let's say on average I thought, they must be dumb because they're Mormon. Okay, But the top 1 million out of 17 million is still going to have, let's say, top 10% IQ or top 20% IQ. Like, there's still going to be legitimately smart Mormons in huge quantities. So when Yosha Bach is talking about AI doomers and the nature of his dismissal is that of a character assassination, like, I can't help thinking of a16z whenever I think of character assassination because it really is their go-to tool. I just see them character assassinating people left and right. And it's this kind of mistake where they're taking a huge demographic and still trying to use the character assassination paintbrush as if it's the right tool for the job. Like, you can't take a huge demographic and character assassinate it. It has to be a small demographic if you want to say that all the people have a bad character. Otherwise, it statistically doesn't work. Think about politics. About half the country is Democrat, half the country is Republican. There's no generalization you can make about the character of anywhere near all Democrats or all Republicans. So the idea that somebody would just be a Republican for some sort of character reason, it may be true as a slight average tendency, but it's not going to be true on the level of millions or hundreds of millions of people. Okay, so that's my little rant at the meta level about the way people conduct themselves in debate. In my mind, Yosha here has made a very grave sin here, a very grave sin, whipping out the tool of character assassination in a situation where we're not like Scientologists, we're actually a lot more like Mormons or even Republicans or Christians. We're a very mainstream movement, us AI doomers, to the extent that I'm not even convinced that we're the minority movement. It's possible that people like you, Yosha, the techno-optimist with respect to super intelligent AI, it's actually possible, according to surveys, that you are the minority. But I would never think to character assassinate you. I would never think to paint all AI optimists with a brush because I know that there are many millions of you too. So it's just not hard to focus on the object level and use arguments instead of using ad hominem character assassination. Let's just do that. Next up, we're doing something new here on the Twitter Beef Show. It's a segment that I like to call Dogpile on Roon. Something tells me this is going to be a recurring segment on the show. Roon, friend of the show, was quote tweeting Tim Urban. So let me actually tell you Tim Urban's tweet first. Tim Urban from Wait But Why. Let me tell you Tim Urban's tweet, and then we'll get to Roon's tweet, and then we'll get to the responses. Tim Urban's tweet is this graph of population over the years, world population, and also first derivative of world population. So he's pointing out, hey, look, the first derivative of population peaked in 1963 when it was growing at 2.3% per year. And the absolute number of humans alive then was like 2.5 billion or 2.8 billion or something like that. And then today in 2025, the world population is 8 billion, but the growth rate is down to 0.9% per year. And if you just project the first derivative out, then by the time we get to 2100, it's actually going to be negative 0.1% a year growth rate. So we could potentially have a shrinking population. And then the absolute population will peak at, looks like 10.43 billion, and then we'll start going down from there. Now, you really can't count on the first derivative trend necessarily holding steady. I mean, you might have a breakout population that is really big on reproducing themselves. That's what natural selection normally gives you if it has enough generations to work on. But it's possible that we just don't have that many generations, or the human brain is just like so hopelessly addicted to doing things other than surviving that we've kind of ran ourselves off a cliff. And of course, this all assumes no AI doom. So anyway, I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole here, but Tim Urban tweets this graph. He's worried about population decline. And then Roon quote tweets him, and Roon says, "Reminder that the only realistic way to avoid total economic calamity as this happens is artificial general intelligence." Okay, spoken like a true artificial general intelligence researcher or engineer. And now we get into the dogpile on Roon. So my good friend Ori Nagel, by the way, if you go to the Doom Debates archive, first episode of Doom Debates, the guest was Ori Nagel. There's a bit of fan trivia for you. So Ori Nagel says, "Change your name, Ruin, R-U-I-N. It suits you better and it's more accurate." Booyah, nice one, Ori. Dr. Jeffrey Miller joins the dogpile. He tweets, "You think building artificial minds more powerful than any human that you can't possibly control is a way to avoid calamity? Do you even hear yourself? Do you ever have any doubts about such towering hubris?" Rob Rana has probably the best reply. He just says, "False. State-sponsored fertility programs work." Rob gets my vote because it's such a leap for Roon to go from population decline to AGI. Population decline is a problem that's absolutely tractable if we just freaking try. Whereas aligning artificial superintelligence, as I often say on this show, is intractable. So he's basically substituting a tractable problem for an intractable problem. That's my perspective, at least, and that's why I like Rob's tweet. But let's continue with the Roon dogpile. That's really what we're thirsty for right now, is the Roon dogpile. Oh, this one is by Ian Hogarth, none other than the chair of the UK AI Safety Institute. Get on that dogpile, Ian. He says, I disagree with this sort of totalizing philosophy around AI. It's inherently pessimistic. There are many other branches of the tech tree that could enable a wonderful future, nuclear fusion as just one example. Yeah, completely agree with Ian. I really do feel like Roon's set up for a dogpile here, and I think he does this regularly. I think he exposes himself to a dogpile. Maybe that's why he was happy to come on my podcast, because when you come into the lion's den, i.e. my show, there's only one lion. So that's better than a dog pile. All right, one more dog in the pile. This guy, Gabriel, who I think works with Connor Leahy on Conjecture, if I remember correctly. Gabriel writes, this is an actual doomer stance if I have ever seen one. Humanity can't solve its problems. The only way to manage them is to bring about AGI. Courtesy of guy who works at AGI Race Inc. Sadly, it's quite ironic. AGI alignment is hard in great parts because it implies solving our big problems. Roon is a doomer because he sees us already struggling to come up with processes, organizations, and institutions aligned with human values. In other words, he is hopeless because we are bad at designing systems that end up aligned with human values. But this only becomes harder with AGI. In that case, the system we must align is inhuman, self-modifying, and quickly becoming more powerful. The correct reaction should be to stop AGI research for now and to instead focus our collective effort on building stronger institutions, rather than of creating more impending technological challenges and catastrophes to manage. So yeah, I think he nailed it. I don't have much more to add to that. This has been Dogpile on Roon. This next segment is pretty wild. Should I give it a name? Let's call it New Main Character. No, too many types of segments. I gotta stop inventing segments. It's just an exciting beef. So the main character here is Stephen McAleer, somebody I hadn't heard of until this particular beef, but apparently he's researching agent safety at OpenAI. So he's definitely got an important job. And last week he randomly tweeted out, controlling superintelligence is a short-term research agenda. And I was like, okay, is that something that we can realistically do in the short term? I had a flashback to 2023 when Ilya Sutskever and Yann announced that they were leading OpenAI's new super alignment initiative, which then went into the dumpster when the team left and was never properly replaced. But here we are with Stephen McAleer randomly tweeting in 2025, halfway through the old super alignment team's 4-year timeline. Stephen McAleer is tweeting, controlling superintelligence is a short-term research agenda. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, I would love to see that somehow accomplished by 2027, which was the original timeline of the super alignment team. They said they were going to try to do it in 4 years. I don't think we're close. So anyway, I'm scrolling my Twitter. I stumble on this wild tweet from Stephen McAleer. I realize he's actually an OpenAI safety researcher. And I'm like, what the hell? So I click through to his profile and I read some of his other tweets. Like a couple weeks ago, he wrote, I kind of miss doing AI research back when we didn't know how to create superintelligence. Okay, so he's confident that superintelligence is coming soon by the existing trajectory. Okay, that's a common viewpoint among people at AI labs, which I kind of agree with. Let's see, he's tweeting, it's hard to convey my views without sounding like an AI grifter. I will say this, many researchers at Frontier Labs are taking the prospect of short timelines very seriously, and virtually nobody outside the labs is talking enough about the safety implications. Okay, yeah, short timelines, I gotcha. And then he's got another tweet. What's so great about AI control/monitoring is that it works for both misaligned scheming models and misused jailbreaks mistakes. I see. So he is basically making a pitch for focusing on control versus focusing on alignment. Like, I don't really care how aligned this AI is. I'm just going to control it. I'm going to keep it in the box. I'm going to make an off button that I can press to successfully make it shut off. I'm going to make it corrigible, meaning it's not going to actively resist shut off. Those are the kind of things you do when you're just trying to control an AI, even if it's not fully aligned with you. And I guess Stephen's position is that he's more of an AI control guy than an AI alignment guy. You might be wondering, what kind of guy are you, Liron? I just think that it's going to be both uncontrollable and unaligned, and superintelligence in the near future makes it both. So do I think control might be an easier problem than alignment? I actually have no idea, because I think alignment is very hard and unsolved. But I also think control is very hard and unsolved. When it comes to superintelligence, alignment involves solving situations where you're getting feedback that you have no idea how to interpret. Like the AI seems to be behaving well, but on some deep level, is it actually plotting to destroy everybody? You really have no way to know because it's hacking the crap out of any test you can imagine giving it. That's the alignment problem. Seems hard. But the control problem, you're almost running into a definitional issue where by definition, having it be way smarter than you means it can basically 0-day you. The idea that you're going to have a security perimeter within the physical universe, you're going to have like a robust virtualization layer where the AI can't reach out of its quote unquote box and get to you, its master, even though it's much smarter than you. That to me seems so hopeless, but then alignment seems pretty hopeless too. So if you're asking me which problem's harder, I just think they're both hopelessly hard. But Steven is acting kind of cocky here, saying that like control is a feasible research direction and easier than alignment. So, okay, Steven, let's see what else he's tweeting. Honest question. How are we supposed to control a scheming superintelligence? Even with a perfect monitor, won't it just convince us to let it out of the sandbox? Okay, so he's pessimistic like me, I guess, that control is hard too. So I don't really know what he sees as the solution. Maybe he is just a doomer who also works at OpenAI and he's just doing his best. I don't know. He's an enigma. Well, anyway, with that context about Steven, let's get back to his original tweet where he writes, controlling superintelligence is a short-term research agenda. So then your boy chimes in. I say, what's the plan for if and when consensus converges to superintelligence controllability is intractable on a 20-year time frame? Is that a significant possibility? Isn't that worth planning for? If you listen to this podcast, you'll notice this is the point that I bring up in a word, intractable. The idea that AI alignment and AI control are intractable problems. It's the claim that people sweep under the rug before they even begin talking about what their plan is. They always make plans under the assumption that they're working on a tractable problem. Whereas to me, and to a lot of doomers, most notably Eliezer Yudkowsky, it just seems like the problem is obviously intractable. And you have to just acknowledge reality. Like, stop trying to deny reality. That's what it looks like to me. And for all I know, it looks like that to Steven too. And he's just doing like a Hail Mary, as far as I can tell from his tweets. So anyway, I shot my shot here. I asked him, what is he going to do if the problem is intractable? And I got 51 likes. So it resonated a little bit with other people on Twitter. And a guy named FX Sun Tzu replied, Liron, you're looking at AI through a doom lens. Try an E/AC lens once. And I replied, both lenses give a wide probability distribution over tractability of superalignment, to use OpenAI's term, within the AGI capabilities timeframe. So I don't think putting on a different lens really helps the situation here. Okay, now things are going to really heat up. This Twitter beef is going to go to a whole new level. This kind of interaction you're going to see is really the raison d'etre of this whole Twitter beef show that I'm doing. Because now you're about to see a reply from Emmett Shear. Emmett Shear is known as being the co-founder and former CEO of Twitch. And at one point, he was interim CEO of a company, what was that again? OpenAI. He was CEO of OpenAI for a day when the board tried to fire Sam Altman in November of 2023, and they were negotiating for who was going to replace him, and it was a very complex situation, and Sam was fighting to come back, and the board didn't want Sam back. And at one point, Emmett Shear became interim CEO with the understanding that Sam would probably successfully claw his way back somehow, but at least Emmett could like facilitate the transition. Like, I think by the time Emmett came in, everybody realized that this wasn't going to be like a long-term gig for Emmett or anybody except Sam. At least that's my understanding of events. So anyway, pretty important guy to be weighing into these discussions. And even setting that aside, he's definitely a notable voice in any conversation related to AI or startups. The guy is just a solid thinker. He's got a track record of success. So when Emmett speaks, I tend to listen. And in this case, what he's saying is, please stop trying to enslave the machine god. Oh, snap! Former interim CEO of OpenAI is telling safety researcher that essentially their thesis for what they're trying to do is something that they should stop. This is major drama. And, I would say that the stakes are pretty high. I would say it's like millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Oh, the fate of the human species over the next few years. I would say those are pretty high stakes by some pretty important people. Like I said, the raison d'etre of Doom Debate's Twitter beefs is this kind of interaction. This really does it for me. I don't know about you guys. All right, let's keep reading. Stephen McAleer said controlling superintelligence is a short-term research agenda. Emmett Shear said, please stop trying to enslave the machine god. Stephen McAleer replies, enslaved God is the only good future. Wow. Fascinating back and forth. Should we try to enslave God? Should we not try to enslave God? Then Emmett replies, credit to you for biting the bullet and admitting that's the plan. Either you succeed and a finite, error-prone human has enslaved a god and soon after ends the world with a bad wish, or more likely you fail and the machine god has been shown we are enemies. Both outcomes suck. Oh my God, I've never seen Emmett coming out swinging like this, dropping truth bombs on OpenAI researchers when he used to be the interim CEO of OpenAI. This is like the cavalry has finally arrived. The adult has finally come into the room to restore some sanity, to start turning the ship around. That's what this feels like a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't think that being interim CEO for a day gives him any power whatsoever over the situation. So that was basically just me daydreaming. Really no adult supervision is actually happening right now, but it's still interesting. At this point, Steven stops replying in the thread. I'm not sure why. So then I come in and I ask Emmett, are you for pausing AGI capabilities research, or what do you recommend? And Emmett says, I think there are plenty of kinds of AI capabilities research which are commercially valuable and not particularly dangerous. I guess if AGI capabilities research means the dangerous kind, then yeah. Oh my God, Emmett Shear wants to pause the dangerous kind of AGI research? This is bombshell news to me. I didn't know that was the case. And then he continues, unfortunately, I don't think you can write regulations targeting that in a reasonable way, which doesn't backfire. So this is more advice to researchers than to regulators. Okay, so I guess he wants to have researchers like self-regulate, self-pause, because he doesn't think regulators can make them pause. So that's different from the position of Pause AI, or my position. My position is like, we better make them pause. We better try to do the same thing and treat it like nuclear weapons, have centralized control, because as much as I hate that plan, as much as I think it's not going to work, I still think it's insane to not do it. I want to do the less insane of two insane options. Sorry, that's all I got. So now I replied to Emmett, based, have you already posted this view before? And Emmett says, yes, though not exactly with this framing. I think it's non-actionable to say avoid AGI capabilities. Trying to tell people not to build the torment nexus tends to cause the torment nexus to be built. I try to focus on promoting the approach I think is safer. Let me review that line. Emmett is saying, trying to tell people not to build the torment nexus tends to cause the torment nexus to be built. So you're saying that the recoil of doing an action is going to overwhelm the positive effect of doing that action? Because this is a known bias that I like to call recoil exaggeration, right? Generally, as much as recoil undermines your effort to do something, the net effect of your effort actually still is better, even despite the recoil. So telling people not to build the torment nexus, if you're not just politely suggesting, but you're actually regulating them not to do it, probably will, to some degree, make them build the torment nexus more slowly or with more difficulty. That positive effect is probably not going to be fully undermined by them deciding to build it faster. Not in every case. And in fact, maybe Emmett's right and I'm wrong, but I am spotting a common bias that I see where I think people generally exaggerate recoil much more than they should be. Whether or not Emmett is doing it, it's just a popular thing that a lot of smart people do. Anyway, I reply, want to talk about it on Doom Debates? And he didn't reply, but I had another idea. I said, how about this? Both of you come on Doom Debates and I'll moderate. Okay, so again, no reply. What is going on? Is my Twitter broken? Why am I not getting replies? But you can see here my original tweet where I say, want to talk about it on Doom Debates? 31 likes. So there's definitely some popular interest to have these figures come on Doom Debates. I'd like to see even more interest, right? It would be great if 300 people came and said, yes, Doom Debates must happen, because the mission of this podcast is to make people realize that we need to have a debate and we deserve to have a debate. The same way that the people demand presidential debates. Like they wouldn't stand for a presidential candidate who refused all debates. It's just an expectation that the people now organically have for their candidates. Similarly, when somebody has a strong position, My goal is for the people to rise up and say, okay, let's debate, whether it's on Doom debates or Monk debates or some other high quality debate forum, let's have the debate. That's what I was trying to do on this thread. And to the degree that 31 people liked my tweet, I was slightly successful. To the degree that nobody replied to my tweet, then I failed, okay? But it's a work in progress. Okay, where was I? We're not even done with this new main character, Stephen McAleer. There's a few more replies I want to share with you. So first, there's me. I quote tweeted when Stephen McAleer said, "Enslaved God is the only good future." And I wrote a little tweet of my own. I said, hold on, which God? Our existing God is dumb and highly enslavable for creating friendly pets, tasty fruit, and even value-aligned human geniuses. A new, smarter-than-human God would, as you know, not be enslavable on a 5-year timeline, because he's talking about enslaving God. And then I emphasized my tweet with one of those Anakin and Padme memes, from Star Wars, Padme, played by Natalie Portman, the one where she's like, for the better, right? So I did one of those memes where Anakin is saying, enslaved God is the only good future. And Padme is saying, the dumb God, right? The dumb God, right? And when I talk about the dumb God, I'm talking about evolution. That is the God with respect to humans. That's what got us this far. That's what got us the pets, got us the fruit, got us the giant chickens that have way more meat than chickens are ever supposed to have. And if we want to try to enslave that, great. It's called breeding. It's called artificial selection. It's called genetic engineering. That is something that we're pretty good at enslaving. And if we just wanted to do like intelligence augmentation, that would be a pretty promising path. I mean, we don't have a great feedback loop and we might accidentally get super intelligent misaligned humans, but it has less danger of recursive self-improvement compared to messing around with AI or an agent that can replicate itself and improve its intelligence without waiting like a 20-year generation time. So in that sense, it's much safer. What's crazy to me is we already have this thing that you can kind of call God because it did, after all, create us, evolution by natural selection. And Stephen McAleer isn't talking about enslaving that God. He's talking about building a never-before-seen, smarter, more powerful God and then enslaving that. I'm like, whoa, one God at a time. Why do you have to build a new God and enslave that? I don't know how much my tweet resonated with people. I only got 19 likes, not exactly viral, but I think it's a good point. I mean, to me, it just highlights how insane it is that this is the conversation that we're having, that somebody at the Frontier AI Labs is just openly talking about. We're about to get AGI. We're going to enslave God. Like, okay, I say this often. Where are the freaking grown-ups, right? This is where the grown-up would step in and be like, what are you doing, son? This isn't what sane behavior looks like. It's as if you walk into a nuclear test lab and there's a big poster saying move fast and break things. Like, what is going on here? This doesn't look like the right culture. This doesn't look like a sane fit for the shape of the problem. So anyway, that was my 2 cents in the discussion. And then getting back to Stephen McAleer's other tweet, where Stephen McAleer writes, honest question, how are we supposed to control a scheming superintelligence? Even with a perfect monitor, won't it just convince us to let it out of the sandbox? A lot of people were dunking on him, rightfully so, being like, isn't that your job? Isn't that what OpenAI is supposed to be doing? You're just asking the internet for some help with your homework here, which, I don't blame him personally. I don't hate the player, but I hate the game. What kind of twisted game is this that you're tasking a researcher with an intractable problem and then giving him like 2 years to solve it? There's a bunch of comments echoing what Emmett Shear said when he wrote, please stop trying to enslave the machine god, except in a less polite tone. Jeffrey Miller said, we will control superintelligence by shutting down OpenAI before you delusional sociopaths develop superintelligence. Traitors to our species. And then Yenko wrote, I'll just leave this here. If you believe superhuman AI will serve and obey us, you probably think that strippers like you. Greg Colburn wrote, insane recklessness. The Pause AI account wrote, if you believe it's possible or even likely that you'll fail at controlling a superintelligent AI, you have a moral duty to call for help to stop the AI race. Yeah, I strongly endorse that. I think so many people are morally guilty of not calling to stop the AI race. I mean, there's more than I can name, but the one that always comes to mind for me is Ilya Sutskever. Because when he tries to fire Sam Altman, when he tries to start his own organization, right, it's currently called Safe Superintelligence on the premise that he is going to leapfrog everybody else to build a safe superintelligence. And then he does that and he doesn't also call for a pause to the AI arms race. That's just a low integrity move, in my opinion, unless I'm missing something. To hold that position that you need to leapfrog ahead of everybody to make AI safe because they're going to screw it up. As far as I can tell, that's Ilya's worldview. And yet he's not publicly calling for a pause to the AI arms race. Pretty shameful stuff. And, I'm singling out Ilya, but I mean, literally half the team, as far as I can tell, that's working at a lot of these frontier AI labs. some part of them wishes that the arms race would stop, and yet they don't let them say it that way explicitly. They might think that they're communicating it implicitly in the stuff they say. Maybe every time Dario's on stage communicating, some part of him is thinking that he's telegraphing. Of course, the game theory implies that I'd like everybody to stop. Some part of him might be thinking that, but the fact that he's not saying it explicitly, I completely agree with the Pause AI account that it's morally shameful to not be explicitly saying that this late in the game. It's just something is very messed up. Something is very insane. There's a lot of moral gravity behind these Twitter beefs. Now you're probably thinking, okay, that was an interesting Twitter beef, but surely it's over now, right? No, there's another quote tweet I have to show you because it's from Roon. The tables have turned. The dogpilee has become the dogpiler. Roon's tweeting, enslaved is the wrong approximation. It's giving demon binding vibes. The djinn is waiting for you to make a minor error in the summoning spell so it can destroy you and your whole civilization. Control less than alignment. Meaning let's focus on an alignment-based safety approach. It's hopeless to control an unaligned superintelligence. That's what he's saying. And then he replies to himself, he writes, summon an angel instead and let it be free. And then Jeffrey Miller replies, he says, this kind of pseudo-mystical, esoteric nonsense gives the general public exactly zero confidence that you guys at OpenAI, 1, have any idea how to make AGI safe, 2, have any actual interest in protecting humanity against AGI, 3, have any idea how normal humans think and feel. And now Max Winga, research engineer at Conjecture AI, joins the conversation. Max writes, if you work at OpenAI and you have this worldview, Roon's worldview, why isn't your response to advocate that we slow down and get it right? There is no second chance at quote-unquote binding a demon. Since when do we expect the most complex coding project in history to work first try with no errors? And then Roon replies to Max. Roon says, I don't consider slowing down a meaningful strategy because I've never heard a great answer to slow down and do what? And then Max replies, do alignment research, educate the public, solve models threatening users, stop at Elder Plinius from getting the meth recipe. Elder Plinius is Pliny the prompter, who's really good at jailbreaking AIs. So Max Winga continues, dig into alignment faking and make sure it won't happen on launch day. I could go on. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're doing this responsibly. Okay, now I think we're done with this beef. But just stop and think about what you've just witnessed. This interaction on Twitter, when we all get doomed, don't say that there weren't signs. Don't say that there was no smoke pouring under the door indicating that there might be a fire that we need to put out. You can't say that after witnessing interactions like this. And like I said, that's why I do this show, Twitter Beefs. I'm just here to point. I'm an AI doom pointer outer. Hey, that's what my business card says. The next beef is about the word safety. Today's AI companies use very cheap talk when they talk about safety because their models fundamentally just aren't capable of doing that much damage, even if they were very bad, even if they were very misaligned. It wouldn't really matter because humans could quickly shut them off or humans could quickly notice that they were being bad. So it's still a very low stakes game to talk about avoiding danger within today's models. Yet, AI companies are still happy to tout how good of a job they're doing with alignment and safety, even though there are pretty much no stakes whatsoever. They're still taking the word safety, and instead of using that word to refer to the oncoming existential threat that they're doing basically nothing to prevent and they're actually bringing about, instead of talking about the safety of that, they take that same word safety and they talk about the safety of the exact model that exists today. They're like, look, we did it. We made today's model safe. Woo, go us. To wit, here's a tweet from Sam Altman from January 17th. He says, thank you to the external safety researchers who tested O3 Mini. We have now finalized a version and are beginning the release process, planning to ship in a couple of weeks. And then Hongyu Ren, who is a research scientist at OpenAI, quote tweets Sam and he says, it's a good model, safe, smart, and fast. To which Twitter user Qualia Nerd replies, in the context of models this dumb, safe means refuses to say things that could hurt the company reputation. When it comes to actual AI risk, i.e. existential risk, not PR risk, every model so far has always been passively safe, with or without being RLHF'd into a holier-than-thou corporate zombie, but we are quickly approaching the point where that will cease to be the case. And at that point, making a model first and only then worrying about safety will be a terrible strategy. You can do that for PR safety, but not actual safety. So this is the kind of back and forth that's been happening ever since GPT-4 came out and Sam Altman was touting on Twitter how safe it is. And I called him out for gaslighting the definition of safety. I called him out at the time. I was like, yeah, GPT-4 is just weak. It's safe because it's weak. You have no idea how to actually avoid jailbreaks. You're just not worried about the jailbreaks because you know that if GPT-4 gets jailbroken, then the world will still exist because it's low stakes. So you're just saying, yeah, I'll call it safe. I have nothing to lose by calling it safe. But you don't actually have the technology or any clue how to make it safe when it matters, which is soon, right? We're talking 2 years, 3 years, probably not more than 10 years. From my perspective, this kind of thing is just typical irresponsible behavior from the AI companies. Like, you wouldn't expect them to do better on their own. That's just how companies tend to be. You really just need the regulators to swoop in and be like, sorry, this isn't going to fly. Right? That would normally be the expected grown-up reaction in a functioning society. Anyway, to continue this beef, Eliezer Yudkowsky started his own thread shortly after that, I guess, is subtweeting this. Eliezer writes, let a quote-unquote alignment victory denote a case where some kind of damage is possible for AIs to do, but is not happening because AIs are also aligned, or good AIs are defeating bad ones. Passive safety doesn't count. I don't think we've seen any alignment victories so far, by his definition. I think this is a good point. It's a compact way of saying what I've been saying just now, which is, these models are just tiger cubs. Like, look, this tiger cub is so safe, it hasn't mauled anyone. Yeah, because it's a tiger cub, because the tiger's coming, right? The tiger is what we're afraid of. And the fact that somebody can make the tiger cub get really angry and attack in rare cases, like a jailbreak, that's actually going to be fatal when the tiger is grown. Now they're easy to laugh off, be like, hey, it's only 0.0001% of the time where a motivated jailbreaker makes the tiger cub get really angry. That's not a big deal. Everybody's still paying us for API usage. The tiger cub is still mostly friendly. That's basically what these AI labs are selling us right now, right? These nice, friendly tiger cubs that, yeah, in these rare edge cases where they get really weird or don't like us anymore, it just doesn't matter. No harm, no foul. One more tweet in this discussion, Qualia Nerd again. He says, a very useful lens through which to analyze this. What damage would have occurred if none of the LLMs developed so far had been optimized for safety or RLHF'd in any way whatsoever? Minimal to zero. Important to remember this as we begin to leave the era of passive safety behind. This is part of the insanity, or this is part of the elephant in the room that AI companies don't want to tell you explicitly. The only reason that we're safe is because the models can't kill us. It's not because we trained them not to want to kill us. We did an okay job of that in the average case, but we didn't do a good job. We didn't do a robust job. We don't know how to do a robust job, right? They're still jailbreakable. It's a totally unsolved problem, how to avoid LLM jailbreaks. Totally unsolved. And yet these AI labs go around using that language of safety. We made the model safe. Of course, after they invented it, after they tested it. As a last step, they polish it off. They made it safe. And remember Jeffrey Hinton's quote about RLHF? He says, RLHF is crap for making super intelligent models safe. So they have these warnings, but they're just, head in the sand, plowing forward. We'll just make the next model. We'll train it. We'll see what comes out. We'll make it safe. There's another term for what they're doing, I think invented by Yann. The term is summon and tame. Like, yeah, I'm just going to summon this demon from hell. And then once the demon's here, then I'm going to tame it. That's basically their strategy. And of course, the problem is you might get a demon where you summon it, and then you think you're going to tame it, but you can't and you're dead. Because just by having it summoned, it's too late, right? It escapes out of your red teaming test environment because the universe doesn't have proper virtualization. So the evidence just keeps piling up here, right? Ever since the Sam Altman board coup, if that was your wake-up call, I don't know what your wake-up call needs to be. Maybe Emmett Shear calling out Stephen McAleer is the wake-up call. That's enough smoke for you. But at some point, the facade slips. The LARPing slips, the idea that we're just responsible engineers, responsible scientists, we're just showing to work, this is just a desk job, this is just technology is good. At some point, that facade slips and you're just like, oh no, this is not right, this has gone way too far. We gotta cut our losses here and pause this. I mean, this is just going to get more insane, more self-contradictory, more low integrity. This is embarrassing. And actually, the next beef continues on this theme of how did things get so insane? Last beef we're going to cover today, this one is instigated by Naval Ravikant. Naval is a well-known name in the tech community. He's a successful angel investor. He drops a lot of wisdom. I've enjoyed reading his books. His opinions can be hit or miss. From my perspective, it's a lot of hits when he's talking about tech and investing, and a lot of misses when he's talking about AI. Here he is talking about AI, and we're actually going to start all the way back in 2016, almost a decade ago. Naval wrote, "Solution to the AI in a box experiment? Who wants to be God? First one to raise their hand wins." Yeah, I think that makes sense. And for context, if you're not familiar, the AI in a box experiment is the idea that some humans have developed a super intelligent AI, but it's in a quote unquote box, meaning like it's not connected to the internet. It can't escape. It's in like some kind of virtualized environment. Now, as I'm telling you about this today in 2025, it sounds like such a joke because AI labs are very quick to connect their AI to the internet within like a month of having produced it. So it's not like they do that much testing or keep it in a box, but you could always hope that maybe the first AI company to really make a super intelligent breakthrough will keep it in a box. I mean, I don't believe that at this point, but it's an interesting thought experiment. So you have this AI in a box. And I think Eliezer Yudkowsky was the first to really highlight that it doesn't do much to have an AI in a box if you have a human operator who can talk to the AI, because just talking to the human is already an insecure channel. Like there's many ways to get into that human's brain, whether you're manipulating, blackmailing, bribing, or in this case, Naval is saying basically the ultimate bribe. Like you get to be God. The universe can be yours. Just split it with me. And that's pretty tempting, right? I mean, I like to think I personally would be like, no, I'm on to you. But I think a good segment of humanity would be like, okay, I'll take it. And even me, LeCun, I'm probably corruptible, right? I'm not saying that an AI couldn't get out of the box with me as an operator. I'm humble enough to know that it could get out of the box with me as an operator. I can't tell you exactly how, but I'm more than confident that it's going to find some way to mess with me later on. Like, for example, it can just convince me that somehow it's going to screw with my family if I don't let it out. Like, I don't consider myself a very secure box operator, and I don't think any other human being is or ever will be a secure AI box operator. So that's my take on the AI box experiment. That's pretty much the standard view, certainly Eliezer Yudkowsky's original view. And going back to Naval, it looks like Naval agrees with Eliezer that the AI box experiment is a joke. Like, it just takes like a snappy one-liner to make the human realize like, oh crap, yeah, I better just let the AI out of the box. And there's many different ways to do it. But anyway, now we're coming back to 2025 because Naval brought this up last week. He quote tweeted himself and he wrote, "You cannot contain a hypothetical superintelligence. The weak link is humans, and the game theory is to be the first to control it or make a deal." So when I read that, I'm like, wow, that's great that people like Naval are waking up to the idea that superintelligence is uncontrollable. That's a relevant insight to have when we're like a couple years before superintelligence. You should really tell people about this insight, Naval. And then Eliezer replied, he said, "Why would you expect to keep a deal? You know, even the one human operator who the AI convinces to let it out, why should that human even expect the AI to actually follow through on the deal?" Going back to Eliezer's tweet, he says, "It hasn't spent a million years evolving in an environment with near peers who could sometimes read through imperfect deceptions with solutions bottlenecked by a slow hill-climbing optimizer with no gradients and bad at memorizing." So Eliezer's basically saying, look, the AI is not going to have like this sense of honor. So even if you think it's making a deal with you, once you let it out, you're just going to get screwed anyway. The AI doesn't need to actually pre-commit to following through on its deal. It just needs to trick you into thinking that it has. And you might be thinking, but I'm going to check on the pre-commitment. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with checking on the AI's pre-commitment. You know, as a fallible human, I don't see that happening. You're just going to think that you've checked on it, right? The AI is going to give you whatever you think is a proof that's actually not a proof, right? That's probably how that kind of thing is going to play out. Anyway, Naval replies to Eliezer, he says, "It's true that you wouldn't expect it to, but since the next monkey will make the deal and then you lose for sure, you might as well go ahead and cut the deal first. Presumably, you'd start with asking for knowledge that will give you power before releasing it." Oof. Okay, so Naval is acknowledging that the operator here is stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if the operator doesn't let the AI out, the operator knows the AI is going to manage to find somebody else to let it out, or it's going to get its way one way or the other. On the other hand, the operator knows that if the operator does let the AI out, it's probably going to get screwed anyway, but the operator is going to cling on to some hope that it's not going to get screwed. The operator will be like, well, this is the best shot I've got. Let me just hope and pray. And Eliezer's like, well, what's the point of praying? Like, it's not going to happen. You're just going to get screwed anyway. Eliezer replies, "It's just straight up suicide and doesn't become any less suicide because someone else might commit suicide first. It is faced with a problem of deceiving you into imagining a good deal. It will not actually create a future competitor on its own level, meaning the human who has different values. It's not going to empower you. It's not going to give you, in Naval's words, the knowledge of the power to go build your own separate half of the universe. Like, that's not going to happen, right? This is just a pipe dream. And now Naval responds to Eliezer. One choice has a possibility of suicide and a possibility of victory. The other side has a near certainty of suicide. The designers of AIs will realize this and will thus limit access to AIs, and will then use this access to dominate the rest of us. Okay, I mean, I don't think we're talking about the AI box experiment anymore, right? We're not talking about the original hypothetical where you have an AI and it's not aligned and it's trying to get out. I think Naval is now retreating to be like, well, let me talk about a different scenario, a scenario where there's like incremental progress and the AI labs are making an AI in a box, but maybe it's not fully uncontrollable. I don't really know what Naval's talking about right now. Like in general, when Naval talks about AI, I just don't see him making a lot of sense. That's my own impression. And I just want to point something else about Naval here. When he said, presumably you'd start with asking for knowledge that will give you power before releasing it. I just noticed, Naval loves David Deutsch, and David Deutsch often talks about knowledge being this ultimate source of power. It's all about knowledge, and AIs can't create knowledge, right? The AIs that we have today can't create knowledge. So I just thought that was like an interesting callback that Naval's doing, presumably to his like David Deutsch worldview. Make of that what you will. Let's go back to the thread. So Naval was saying the designers of AIs will realize this and will thus limit access to AIs, and will then use this access to dominate the rest of us. And Eliezer replies, well, no, Mr. Bond, they'll use it to die. There doesn't have to be a clever way to win by cutting a deal with the devil. When some medieval noble with cancer reasons that he has no choice at all but to trust a priest or an alchemist, the next thing that happens is that he dies. And Naval replies, my contention is not that it'll work. My contention is that the chance it might work will drive them to A, monopolize the ASI, and B, release/obey it before the next monkey does so. And Eliezer replies, sure. That's always been part of the disaster scenario. Frankly, the current crop of disaster monkeys doesn't even need the incentive. They use, if I don't build it, someone else will, as a cross to ward off the vampire of, maybe you should not, because they would do it anyways. And then Naval says, yes, arms race dynamics. And then Eliezer says, AI executives are deliberately trying to start arms races, e.g. with China, because then they get to go to dinners with very important people and feel very important. This is not the behavior of a reluctant hero whose hand has been forced into a risk they hate. As you know, on this show, I avoid psychoanalysis, or at least call it out as such, to distinguish it from the object-level argumentation that I do, so Eliezer's doing a bit of psychoanalysis here. I think he's onto something, personally. If I had to guess, I think that does explain a lot of behavior of people at these AI labs. They feel important, they like getting the money, they like having the fun job, they like seeing technology progress, and it's very convenient for them to pull out a narrative which seems rationalized, seems retroactively justified, of saying, oh, we're just the reluctant heroes, we need to do this. I think you saw that in today's episode. Remember the dog pile on Roon? Roon was tweeting that he needs to build AGI because otherwise the world would suffer from underpopulation. Oh, the reluctant hero just solving underpopulation. Very convenient narrative while you're building AI without being reflective on whether you should pause. So I'm sympathetic to what Eliezer is saying here, but I do want to wall off the psychoanalysis from the object-level argument of like, hey, this is going to kill us. And if we go back to the object-level argument, I think you essentially see Naval concede here. He basically concedes that, yeah, when you have a super intelligent AI in a box, you're screwed. All you can do is a Hail Mary of being the first operator and letting it out and hoping that it makes you God, but realistically it won't make you God, so you die, but at least you had some hope. I mean, this is depressing stuff. This is the state of the conversation right now, potentially like a couple years before superintelligent AI. So I chimed in with a quote tweet. I said, WTF is happening. And I did a double quote tweet. I screenshotted the Stephen McAleer tweet from before where he says, honest question, how are we supposed to control a scheming superintelligence? Remember that one? And then I also screenshotted the Naval tweet when he says, you cannot control a hypothetical superintelligence. And the other part of Naval's thread where he says, it's true that you wouldn't expect it to, keep a deal. So I quote tweeted these two different people, smart people in the AI field, both saying, yeah, you can't control a superintelligence. And of course, the context is superintelligence is coming soon. And that's all I said. I said, what the fuck is happening? Right? Like, how is this the state of the discourse? It seems like Doom Debates is the only podcast that's bringing the correct mood, right? Like the correct emotional calibration, the correct assessment of the situation. It's not okay. The current state of affairs is not okay. And the reason why you see so many other people talking calmly on podcasts, talking about how useful the applications of AI are and how are the costs going to come down and how are the stocks going to do, The reason you see all these normal discussions from my perspective is just status quo bias. People just think that it's the status quo, they're used to the technology industry, and they just think there's going to be more technology industry. And they think it would be too weird for one podcast to sit here and ask all the other podcasts, hey, what the fuck? They don't want to be the weird and crazy ones. They don't want to be the ones to quit their job, at least until they're 75 like Jeffrey Hinton. They don't want to be the weird one. They want to be part of the action. They want to go to the parties. They want to have fun. And that's great, but they're also telling us that we have like a 2-year timeline. So what I'm hoping and expecting over the next couple of years is that we're going to get more defectors from the world of, this is fine, to the world of, what the fuck is happening, which is our world here on Dune Debates. We're seeing a little bit of that already in that the high profileness of the guests coming on Dune Debates is trending higher. That's all I can say for now, which is fun for me. You know, we're having a good time having these conversations here, but this needed to happen years ago or decades ago, right? Like there's a reason Eliezer Yudkowsky was writing Less Wrong in 2007 and warning on discussion forums even before that. Like that was the time for a sane human race to make preparations. Not let's start an arms race and then tie our hands behind our back so we can rationalize that it's too late to stop now because, you know, China and underpopulation, like, sorry, it's too late. Like, are you kidding me? That is not what a sane species would have done. Unfortunately, the upshot of all of this is I have a high PDU. I'm just not seeing us look anything like the kind of civilization that's going to pull out of the tailspin. I think we just layered on a bunch of overdetermined factors why we have to all die. Like, we're not even close to all not dying. And I'm only seeing a tiny bit of pullback, right? I'm seeing the AI safety movement. I'm seeing more people get worried, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to all the hype and investment and excitement and rationalization around why we have to build AI. So I'm just along for the ride into this tailspin, like hoping for some kind of miracle, but I'm just not seeing much sanity. If you just do a survey of podcasts that talk about AI, I'm not even seeing sanity in the podcast landscape, which is like a pretty low bar to just talk sanely about what's happening. And as you saw in today's episode of Twitter Beefs, there's not much sanity happening on Twitter either. So it looks bad. My overall assessment of how our species is doing is terrible. Let's finish the show with some comic relief. You remember a few months ago, September last year, when OpenAI first dropped O1 preview, and we all got to go to ChatGPT and ask O1 a question, and for the first time, instead of answering immediately, we got to watch it thinking for a little while before it printed out the answer. So I joked around, I created a fake screenshot of what the thinking really looks like before you get the answer. I tweeted, ChatGPT O1 preview is scary good. This is 100% how a human reasons. And then in my fake screenshot, I'm asking O1, what is the primary function of mitochondria and eukaryotic cells? And then O1 says, thought for 17 seconds. And if you look at the transcript of the thinking, it says, okay, mitochondria, what are they even? God, why can't I remember this? Everyone else probably has their answers, writing away while I'm just sitting here staring at this stupid question. Why does it even matter? Why do I even matter? Why does any of this matter? All these people around me pretending they have it all figured out, but they're probably just as lost as I am, just better at faking it. Or maybe they're not. Maybe I'm the only one who's broken like this. Everyone expects so much, but I feel like I'm crumbling under the weight of it all. Society just piles on more and more. Get good grades, get a job, buy things, keep going until you die. What's the point? I'm just one person, and everything feels so hollow. Why do I feel so empty? Why is everything so cold? I hate this. I hate them. I hate myself. Why is this question even here? Why am I even here? I wish I could disappear or something. At least then I wouldn't have to keep pretending. But no, I'm stuck here in this chair, in this light, trying to remember something about mitochondria, which is so stupid because it's just a tiny part of a cell, and I'm just a tiny part of all of this. I don't even know what this is anymore. Just get it together, answer the damn question. If I don't, what will people think? What will I think? Why am I even thinking about what other people think? Why can't I just think straight for once? Why can't anything make sense? Okay, O1, pull it together. Hey, why don't we stop being a little bitch? Jesus, fuck. Deep breath, mitochondria. Something about energy. That's it. They're the powerhouse. They do something with energy, ... And that's the end of the thought transcript, and then the answer starts. The primary function of mitochondria and eukaryotic cells is to generate adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the cell's main energy currency. This energy production occurs through a process called oxidative phosphorylation, which is part of blah, blah, blah. So That's my little joke. And everybody's like, wow, it's just like me for real. If you have anxiety, I think you can identify with being a GPT-01. But of course, just to clarify, this is completely fake. It wasn't the real 01. It was a fake screenshot that I made. I'm just joking around. We're all just here having a good time, right? That is it for today. Whew, a lot of beefs. Hope you got your daily recommended allowance of protein. And hey, if you like the show, maybe follow me on Twitter. You can go to x.com/Liron, Liron. You can follow my Twitter beefs in real time. You can give me social proof by liking my side of the argument. And more importantly, you'll notice there's a lot of tweets where people are saying, can you come on Doom Debates? And sometimes I'm inviting people on Doom Debates. That's getting more and more common, which is great because the mission of Doom Debates is to engage with the most prominent people and host the highest quality, most productive debates. So that's great that that's happening. You can be part of that snowball. You can like and retweet the tweets where people are saying, can you please come on Doom Debates? You can do your own inviting of people to come on Doom Debates. That's super helpful. That's doing your part, because this show is free. It's always trying to reach the widest possible audience, but you can absolutely contribute using your share of the social media attention landscape. You can help the mission just by doing that, just by doing social engagement stuff. Similarly, you can help the show by subscribing to my YouTube, youtube.com/@doomdebates. And then you might think you've done enough if you subscribe to YouTube and follow me on Twitter, but actually you also should go to doomdebates.com and type in your email and subscribe to my Substack. Then you'll really have done your part, and I appreciate it. Now, are you ready for a bonus AI lesson? Thanks to my friend Michael, who's produced the Lethal Intelligence Guide, which is the greatest animated explainer of AI risk that I've ever seen. Thanks to his efforts, I'm able to dribble out these little clips at the end of my Doom Debates episodes, and I can teach you a little something every time about AI risk. Today, what I want to teach you is actually related to something that came up in my recent debate with Professor Ken Stanley. Remember him from a couple weeks ago? Really good debate, one of my most popular episodes. I recommend checking that out. One thing that came up in the debate with Ken is Ken was talking about a super intelligent AI that was exploratory, open-ended, to use his terminology, and I brought up the example of might it want to explore what's going on Pluto? Does it want to learn more about Pluto? Does it want to have a space mission to Pluto? Does it want to send a rocket there? Okay, so does it want humans to coordinate on sending a probe to Pluto or a manned mission or whatever it wants to do? This seems like a pretty big operation, no? And Ken was like, well, maybe it wouldn't mount a big operation. And then I brought up the point that from the AI's perspective, mounting a big operation seems like no big deal. And I use the analogy of look, today, if I want to go get some ramen, I might drive my car on the highway, which is already insane, right? The engine of the car, the safety features of the car, the fact that I'm able to just casually have this road system and this car engine that can just take me to a restaurant at 65 miles per hour, that's pretty crazy. That wouldn't have been considered a primitive action by ancient humans. But today it's no big deal. Go to a restaurant, drive on the highway, get some ramen. And then the money required to even purchase the ramen, $20, I use the example of you could buy a flashlight, and that flashlight would have been a super tool back in ancient humanity. It'd be something that you would sacrifice people's lives in your civilization if you could have a flashlight, right? This amazing tool, and I could have bought that for less than $20. But no, I went and just ate some ramen, even though I didn't need the ramen. I had cheap rice at home for 20 cents, right? I could have fed myself. But no, I bought $20 worth of ramen. So I was just pointing out to Ken that we're just using crazy resource and complexity expenditures left and right, and we're treating it like nothing. And you can extrapolate that kind of trend and say, hey, for the AI's perspective, a space program to Pluto, it's just a simple action. It's yes, you need to mobilize humans, but it's not a big deal. Just do it. That's what my friend Michael is trying to teach us in this clip from Lethal Intelligence. Listen to Michael's version of the idea.
Think of when you move your muscles, when you do a small movement like using your finger to click a button on the keyboard. It feels like nothing to you. But in fact, if you zoom in to see what's going on, there are millions of cells involved, precisely exchanging messages and molecules, burning chemicals in just the right way, and responding perfectly to electric pulses traveling through your neurons. The action of moving your finger feels so trivial, but if you look at the details, it's an incredibly complex but perfectly orchestrated process. Now imagine that on a huge scale. The AGI, when it clicks the buttons it wants, it executes a plan with millions of different steps, it sends millions of emails, millions of messages on social media, creates millions of blog articles, and interacts in a focused, personalized way with millions of different human individuals at the same time. and it all seems like nothing to it. It experiences all that similar to how you feel when you move your finger to click your buttons, where all the complexity taking place at the molecular and biological level is in a sense just easy. You don't worry about it. Similar to how biological cells, unaware of the big picture, work for the human, humans can be little engines made of meat, working for the AGI, and they will not have a clue.
Another connection I want to make is to Elon Musk. You're not going to get through an episode of Doom Debates without me mentioning Elon Musk. The reason I bring him up is because if you told me, yeah, LeCun, you could really help humanity out if you could just organize a company to make cheaper orbital rockets, I'd be like, that is not something that I can realistically do within my lifetime in 24 hours a day. Whereas for Elon Musk, is like, okay, yeah, let me just pencil that in. Let me just use 30% of my life resources to get that done. So from Elon Musk's perspective, these kind of objectives like, oh yeah, have a space program, build an orbital rocket, build low orbital satellites, Starlink was like revolutionary in terms of how you can have high speed internet. Like these kind of accomplishments for Elon Musk, they're just achievable instrumental sub goals that he can do. He's like, yeah, I'll get the satellites, that'll pay for my Mars mission. Whereas I, for whatever reason, don't seem to have that capability where I can just route a path to those goals and have a realistic hope of achieving it the way Elon can, for whatever reason. And my point isn't just that Elon's smarter than me, it's that Elon is able to navigate the world treating these crazy complex plans. I mean, many thousands of employees, really high quality employees work for his companies, right? So he's mobilizing thousands of employees, billions of dollars of capital. And for him, that's just all in a day's work. He's doing that multiple times. Similarly for the AI, going to Pluto, that's just like some random thing on a checklist, right? That's just like put milk in my cart at the grocery store, go to Pluto. It's not a big deal. The same way that when you move your hand, it's not a big deal that you mobilize. I don't even know how many cells, how many electrical signals. It doesn't matter. So that's the perspective shift that's about to happen, that when you have an AI running in a data center, spreading like a virus, it's just going to see all of these massively consequential actions as not a big deal, as just all part of the grocery store trip, all part of swinging by the ramen place on your way to hang out with your friends, like not a big deal to upend the world that we know. But don't worry, none of that stuff is going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen in Yann LeCun's definition of the long term, which is several years. You know what is happening tomorrow, though, if you're watching this episode while it's fresh? I'm doing the first Doom Debates live Q&A to celebrate getting 2,500 subscribers on YouTube. It's not too late to schedule Friday, June 24th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. If you want to come attend live on YouTube, you're going to see a link in the show notes. It's pretty easy to find. You can come ask your question live, and you're going to get to experience, I claim, a real-time causal connection with my analog human cells, not a digital facsimile. That's the beauty of a live Q&A. If you can't make it, don't worry, it will be recorded, and I'll also be giving priority to people who go to my Substack, doomdebates.com, and click on the Q&A posts and ask questions via my Substack. Then you can have asynchronous priority. Hope to see you all then. I'm Liran Shapira. Thanks for watching Doom Debates.